Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is a walkthrough for Battlefield Bad Company 2, played on the PC on hard difficulty. This is the very beginning of the game, the very first mission, and this walkthrough is going to be a streamlined sequence of the main missions with the cutscenes, the downtime, and the in-between moments trimmed out so that it's all the action just in one place. This is not a project that anybody was really asking for, nor is it a game that is all that difficult. That being said, if you play it the wrong way, and if you play too aggressively, you will get put down very quickly, as I myself found out when I was playing this game. But that was an interesting moment too. Not entirely certain what happened to the Type 100 then, but I got it thrown to me by a ghost as my teammate ran away. But I've been playing a lot of Battlefield 5 recently, and this walkthrough is going to be me essentially talking a lot about Battlefield. Talking about my history with the games, where I started, how I feel about it now, talking a lot about Battlefield 5 because it's quite an interesting topic, and talking about Bad Company 2, which was the very first Battlefield I actually played. I am not an old school Battlefield guy, I'm not a Battlefield vet, not really a Battlefield person at all, which we'll get into. But there were some issues running this game and playing this game for this walkthrough. The first one that I came across was the FOV. As you might notice, the game's a little bit close right now. The FOV is super claustrophobic at times, and it gets a lot worse in buildings and later on. And as you can see, the game's kind of stuttering up a little bit just there. There were performance problems with the game when it's saved. Sometimes it stutters a little bit. Every so often the game chops up a little bit and what have you. It's just because it's an old game and the port for this is perhaps not the best. Not as good as it would, like Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4 or something like that. This was I believe, a console-specific Battlefield that later on went to PC. This was kind of bringing Battlefield to the consoles, and you can kind of see a lot of the flaws in that from a lot of the features. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Another thing is you can't skip any of the cutscenes except for the vignetted ones, so there are certain moments where you just can't really proceed in the game, which is kind of unusual and awkward. And I also came across a couple of game-breaking glitches, which I will warn you when I get to them what they were. And this is the second time I've come across this with playing Battlefield on PC, because I haven't really played Battlefield on PC. I was a console guy when I was playing these games. But I played Battlefield 4 about a month ago, because I was contemplating doing another walkthrough for it on PC, maybe something more exciting, a little bit better gameplay and what have you. And I ended up getting to a segment where you couldn't swim. You had to swim through a flooded ship, and the swimming wouldn't push you forward, and there was a current pushing you back, and you couldn't do it. Like, I was there for about 15 minutes trying to do it, and by the end I finally finagled it by just being frustrated, but I wanted to break something because it was fucking annoying. And then I went on to the forums and I did some googling, and it immediately came up, there is a game-breaking bug where your guy refuses to swim forward in this current section, so tons of people were getting it, but I never came across it on console. It was just on my PC experience, which was kind of fucking annoying. But yeah, scripting errors, classical DICE moments, a lot of features that made this run a little bit more tricky than it needed to be. I also had a capture failure on one of the missions. It's not a very difficult mission, and I'll explain it when I'm there, but fundamentally I did this in two sessions of recording to knock this one out, and I had a lot of fun doing it at first. Later on it got to be a little bit of a chore, which I'll talk about with some of the problems and things. But fundamentally, this was the last time, I believe, that Battlefield had what I would call a Battlefield campaign. So Battlefield 3 and 4 after this both had campaigns, and I did like those campaigns, but I feel like they were closer to Call of Duty than they were to Battlefield. If anybody remembers the original Bad Company, was very Battlefield in all its jank and all its weirdness, and I fucking hated it. I really did not like Bad Company 1, although there are some features in it what I want to talk about. Bad Company 1 for me was kind of terrible, but this one I found to be a really good step in the right direction of maintaining the Battlefield atmosphere and feel and some of the stuff you do, while bringing it a bit more mainstream and a little bit less, simulation-y, authentic and weird and awkward. Although a lot of that awkwardness still exists. This corner here, guys, is one of the first moments where you're going to come up across a chance of the enemies killing you. How this game works is you take random damage at times. I don't know if it's headshot related. I'm not entirely certain. There's times when you get hit once and then you feel fine and then you die. And then there's other times where you get hit several times and your screen's quite bloody but you're okay. There are a couple of moments of you can get instantly melted and then other times you're invincible. It's kind of a common theme of some of these projects I've been going back to. Something worth noting right now, guys, if you get on any of the mounted guns in any of these on-rail segments, you will have very aggressive mouse deceleration, which means no matter how fast I have my sensitivity and no matter how far I swipe the mouse pad, my mouse will be limited to how much I can move it. Because listen to this wonderful mechanic that I'll never understand why anybody uses this. Mouse deceleration, the faster you move your mouse, the less distance it travels. Can you believe that shit? So if you gently drag your mouse, you will move at a decent clip. But if you go to do a swipe and a flick, you will go nowhere. It's just backwards. It's like inverted sensitivity. It means nothing to me, and I've got no idea why it does it this way. But it's in this game. You can turn it off by going into doing some all kinds of weird hack things. I didn't bother because it was a little bit too much for how much you don't really need to, because there's only about 3 segments where you're really going to get affected. And truth be told, in these moments, guys, when you're doing these, they're fantastic to look at. Like, it's exploding, it's very epic, there's stuff to shoot, you know, it's very cinematic. But I've never died in one of those moments outside of the snowy level where I drove off a cliff. On this corner, there's going to be a couple guys. You'll notice I'm going to try and use hipfire as much as I can, because I really like hipfire in Battlefield. But in this one, it can get you killed. It's very Battlefield-y, so, like, you'll notice when you ADS too, there's so much shake, there's so much bounce, there's so much going on that it can be really easy to not understand why your bullets aren't hitting where you're pointing. Fortunately, this game does have hit markers, so you can tell when you're hitting people, but there's many times where I died and I was on target and my bullets just weren't doing anything, and it's just like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? But when it does work, and when the rounds do connect, it feels very visceral. There's a great feeling to it, and you can definitely see what's gone into making Battlefield so much better than some of the other franchises as it's built forward. One of the things you'll notice on this, which I noticed immediately, is just how bassy the sound is. When you shoot in this game, and when stuff blows up in this game, it feels like it has impact, and I'll always remember my first experience with Bad Company 2, because I retroactively played Bad Company 1 afterwards. But, like, look at this! What the fuck was that? Oh my goodness, there's moments like that where I'm like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to cover this game. But I really liked this at the time. But it stems into the problems that I have with this game and with this franchise, which is going to get some coverage in here, but I don't want to go full hog right at the beginning. But the sound is fantastic, and there's so much Battlefield going on at almost all times. But I'll never forget my first multiplayer match, where I was playing a game of Conquest with a friend, and I didn't know what I was doing, you know. Battlefield is a different type of game than Call of Duty, and I was a Call of Duty person. So I was just kind of running around. It was so big, there was so many flags, I didn't know where the enemies were going to be, I didn't know where I was supposed to be. I just didn't know how to move and what to be thinking and how to approach stuff, so it led to kind of moving building to building and not really seeing anybody, not really understanding the traffic patterns and what have you. But I'll never forget the sound of it, and when the walls start coming down, and just things that you're not used to happening, and when they happen, they're so much more effective because you're not a Battlefield player. And then I remember playing the campaign, and I thought the campaign was okay. I didn't think it was great. I thought it was a lot better than the first one, after I played the first one. But there's two levels that really jumped out to me in my memory. The first one was the Sangra level, where you're in the desert and you're going to 3 different places because it's a little bit of a sandbox, and I thought that was the closest thing to the kind of Bad Company 1 vibe of their campaign. And then the final mission, where you're using a shotgun to go through a plane, and all the scenery is destroying, and the destruction is quintessential Frostbite and looking really, really cool. Oh, by the way, right now, you can't shoot these people. If you're wondering why I'm not taking the shot like I always do when I do these old games, I always try to sequence break by killing everybody before the team fires, and the game simply will not let you do it. And the gun that I'm going to be using for the majority of this game, guys, is going to be the LMGs. They have a lot of ammunition, and they have generally quite favourable iron sights. I don't like this gun right now because it makes me feel so claustrophobic with this FOV. The field of view in this Battlefield game is vertical more so than horizontal, so there's no way to make it look like how I need it to look without feeling like I can't turn and everything's kind of like coming in on me. So, like, right now, this was an adjustment period and a half. That is not to say that this is not a good gun, and it's not to say you shouldn't use it. I think the ACOG on this is really good, and I think that this gun is pretty much fine. I remember it on the Assault class in the multiplayer. But we're going to be pushing through these houses, using the buildings as best as we can to pepper people down. The enemies in this game take a decent amount of damage to die. You can hit them with multiple headshots and it won't kill them. Sometimes it takes 3 bullets. It's kind of interesting, but you will get used to it. And as with most first-person shooters of this generation, when your screen starts to get affected by damage, you want to try and take a hiatus, back away and heal. It can be quite difficult to know when you're healing in this game at times, because the screen can linger sometimes, but you'll hear a needle, a syringe as your regen begins, which is a really nice audio touch to a mechanic that was in Bad Company 1. So if you've watched any of my recent walkthroughs where I've talked about first-person shooters and mechanics and the way that we're moving forward and changing how health has been governed and using old systems and new systems and vice versa, you'll remember that I spoke about the Black Ops 4 stim, where when you press a button your character stabs himself. You can do it while doing several animations. It's very quick, it's very effective, and it starts your regen, and it's my favourite healing system in contemporary first-person shooters. Well, the first time I ever saw it, guys, outside of just arbitrary health packs, was in Bad Company 1. In Bad Company 1, to heal, you would swap your weapon to a syringe, this huge bad boy syringe, and you would stab yourself in the chest with it, and it took quite a decent amount of time, and then after you did that, you'd be healed. And there were moments in that game on the hardest difficulty when I played it, where I was running through a field, surrounded by dickheads and tanks and all kinds of horrible shit, getting bombarded, and all I was doing was stabbing myself in the chest with a needle the full time. It was a miserable experience, but it was the first instance of that stimming technique, and I feel like Treyarch just made it amazing. They made it so good. Modern Warfare's ruined it because it's slow now and it's awkward and it looks dumb. Black Ops 4 perfected it, and I would love to see it come back in some form. The clipping spot I've got right... Do you see the physics on that guy? There's some really wonderful jank in this game. There's some shit jank as well and some frustrating stuff which we'll get into. But there's some really fun, crazy moments. And you can just look at how it looks. This is a game from when did this come out? I think it was 2009. This game is, of course, it's using my hardware to make it look better because that's what PC games do. But it's got a really, really good look to it. You can see the atmosphere. You can see the effects. You can see the early days of all the weather and the destruction and the things we're going to really take center stage with the Battlefield franchise. It really was such a great game, and it's so interesting coming back to it. Oh, by the way, there's 2 choppers here. You can actually kill the people coming down the lines, but they'll hurt you quite quickly, so you have to be careful. And additionally, there are times when you shoot people, and I don't even know where the bullets go, man. I really don't. I don't know if this game is projectile, but I think it is, because I think, isn't all Battlefields projectile? Isn't that their thing? Because I know that you had to lead with the sniper rifles in Bad Company 2, because believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, when I played this game at launch on 360, I was a sniper in the multiplayer, and that might come as a surprise to anybody who knows how I like to play nowadays, but believe it or not, yeah, I sniped in this game. And I know that can oftentimes give you a bad impression of people, because I'll be the first to admit, I got so frustrated at Bad Company 2 at all the scouts on my team doing nothing and sniping from 9 miles away being worthless, never pushing objectives, never pushing the rush devices, never doing anything. And I always hated those people, and I still do. But I was a sniper that was leading the team. I generally got a lot of points, I generally got as many objective points as I could. I would shut down entire areas of the map and drop the airstrikes and things, and generally have a really, really good time and feel like I was effective, because my thing with multiplayer, guys, is I don't really care what you do as long as you're effective at what that is. I saw a Reddit post yesterday on Battlefield 5, and I think I'm going to analyse this on stream, because this guy's a goddamn champion in my mind, but I just don't know how anybody can do what he's done. So his thread was a link to Battle Tracker showing his statistics on Battlefield 5, and he says, "Whoop, I finally got in the top percentage for a statistic." And the statistic he's in the top percentage for is dying. So this guy has 2 days on Battlefield 5. 2 days, he's level 37, something like that. He has a 0.11 KD. 0.11 KD. I didn't know real human beings could have stats like that. I would have thought that that was a dummy account, or maybe an account that's been AFK and never got turned off, or, you know, I didn't think a person trying to play a video game could have those kind of stats. And I'm not trying to be elitist, I'm not trying to be a dickhead and bully. I think this guy's a fucking genius. I think he's a beast, because he can play that, do those results, and be okay with it, and have a good time, hopefully. His objective score was pretty good. I think he was 400 score per minute, and he'd done a lot of capping and what have you, which I'm all for people who play the objective. Those people are rare, and we need more of them. But this guy had a 0.11 KD, and you just... It's that thing, isn't it? It's like, how could you enjoy the game? I honestly couldn't. I have really high standards for myself. It can be absolutely miserable sometimes because you can't turn them off. I always want to be scoring high, I always want to be doing well, I always want to be helping the team, being effective, doing everything I can to be what I need to be in that particular moment. And then you have a player like that, you know, he's happy that he's managed to get a certain stat to a certain percentage, and in his mind that's him being effective. Unfortunately, if he was on my team and I was playing, I would be getting really fucking frustrated at him, and I wouldn't say anything anyway, because I suffer in my own room and shout at myself, but I wouldn't want that player on my team, even though he's probably having a good time and doing his own thing and being effective in his own mind. But for me, like, no. How many times have you been on a team, guys, where you felt like you were the only person doing anything? How many times have you been surrounded by teammates where you've put bullets on one guy, and he's killed you, and none of your team were able to do one thing, one bullet that would have saved your life? Like, there's so many moments, isn't there, where you wonder who the people are that are on your team in these kind of bigger battles. And I think that's one of the staples of kind of Battlefield as a game, which is another thing I want to talk a lot more about, but I don't want to get into too much of this beginning part here. But this is an on-rail sequence where when you point at people, the bullets just decide to not work sometimes. I just don't get it. This is a light machine gun with a decent iron sight, and I'm going to try my best to fight the mouse deceleration to put these people down, but the game's just like, nope. It's bizarre. Coriolis effect, Chris. You've got to aim better. But yeah, Battlefield 2. So many things to talk about. So little time to do so. Because this campaign's pretty short once you put it all together like I've done here. You can't really cancel reloads in this game, I don't think, when it comes to speeding up the end of them. It feels like that reload for the LMG takes forever, which is quite unfortunate because I'm a rather impatient player these days. But some things to talk about in this game, guys. The run in this game is really slow. The movement is not the best. It has the same problems that Frostbite's kind of always had, where there are times when your inputs get dropped a little bit, there's times when the game is a little delayed, there's times when the terrain can be a bit of a problem to scale to get around, you're going to get stuck on a lot of things, you're going to feel kind of slow in general. And then one of the strange things that you might not be aware of if you never played this Battlefield, you can't prone in this game. So you can only crouch in this particular title, and proning can be really, really effective at keeping you alive. On this moment here, I just try and aim for the driver. If you take the driver out, it stops the truck. And I do think in the design here, in the programming, I think they've made it so that you don't take full damage, or they're not as accurate as they could be, because you've got no way to dodge. And I'll never understand why we don't have more sections like this that have the time crisis mechanic of being able to crouch into cover to regen and pop back out. And I don't want it so that the vehicle can die while you're hiding, because I think that's always a really stupid mechanic that doesn't lead to fun gameplay. Like, I'd like a balance when it comes to on-rail segments, where it's a balance of technique, skill, and challenge, whereas there's two ways now, isn't there, with most games? Not so much anymore, because the on-rail stuff is kind of easy now, but there's either the one where you're invincible, or there's the one where you're so fragile that it's just a goddamn meat grind until you get the checkpoint. And there's no two ways around it. It's one of them is RNG fest, the other one is just a power fantasy. Here's the helicopter. I couldn't tell where the pilot was for a second there. I kind of lost him in everything going on. The screen does flash quite a lot in this game. It's very realistic, as people like to say, even though I think realism in video games is just a euphemism for here's a bunch of shit mechanics that we're going to try to convince you that are good, but no bugger wants them. But you know, one of the things I really like about this campaign is that it takes place a lot in the jungles, in the rainforests. I'm not entirely certain what part of the world this is. I know that it's going to be hopefully in a place called Valparaiso, because that was one of the multiplayer levels that looked like this in some ways. But I really respect that there's so much jungle warfare in this one, because for some reason when I came back to it, I thought that it went to a city, but I was confusing Battlefield 3 and 4, because there's a lot of urban stuff in those, and I do like the urban stuff, but this is really refreshing, because there's something cool about jungles. Ever since GoldenEye, I've really liked jungle levels, and you don't see them that often because they're very difficult to do, and it kind of breaks my heart that Battlefield 5's campaign is so god-awful, and so half-arsed and half-baked, and full of fucking women taking on 50 men with a pistol and shit, and all this weird political revisionistic history nonsense that's taken away from the fact that... See him do a commando roll? The guy in the cowboy hat's a beast. You see him a lot. But you'll also notice, guys, if you want to do a drinking game for this particular walkthrough, every time I put a bullet on a guy and I don't get a hit marker, take a shot. And be careful, because this game is intermittent with that. But like, Battlefield 5 looks beautiful. The forests on the Pacific look like the best thing I've ever seen when the weather comes in. Like, it looks better than fucking real life. It's so goddamn beautiful. And the movement in that game has still got a lot of the problems that Battlefield has always had, legacy issues, but you've got this slide that's really good at snaking around and makes you feel super mobile and doesn't affect your accuracy too much. You've got really good hipfire. Like, the hipfire in Battlefield 5 is monstrously good, and I love that. Like, there's so many factors that I'd love to share for Battlefield 5 on my channel, and then the campaign is just turd. Most of it's stealth, and when it's not stealth, it's just not interesting or fun. And it's super frustrating. These bits are interesting too. Every time there's a segment where you have to pick up this launcher to take out a vehicle, the launchers don't have a lock, so you have to hit moving targets with a missile that's projectile. And it doesn't seem like the most difficult thing to do, and it isn't, but it's not easy either. And I had to re-record this mission again. This was the mission that I had the capture error on. And on my original recording that recorded just a pause menu for some reason, even though I didn't have the game paused, I hit that boat in one rocket, and I would have loved to have shared that with you. And it's one of the things when you record for anything, if you get a capture device and you start recording, you're going to notice some trends that happen, especially over time. The time when you mess up, the time when you get a capture problem or something, you know, hinders your progress of what you're trying to do, you will always lose the most interesting stuff. You never lose the shit segment where you're playing like garbage. You never lose the segments where it's downtime and it's all talking and it's got all the best checkpoints so you don't have to do it again. You always lose the most awkward to get back to, difficult, arduous, nonsensical moment where you did a really cool thing and then you try and do it again and you can't. Like, it happens so much. It's such a smite fest when that does take place. And conventionally, guys, I would use this moment to traverse to the next segment and just cut this out. But the video would have been a little bit shorter if I took all the travel out, and I wanted to be a decent amount of time for me to speak on this project. I think that this is a really great moment, not only to showcase, you know, the early weather effects, the early environment and the trees and the lush, but I wanted to also speak about the atmosphere that it sets up. There is some very deliberate pacing and peaks and valleys here for when the event does kick off, and there's a bunch of enemies hiding here in little mats. It's a little bit of a scare. There's the thunder, there's the weather. Like, they do a really good job of setting up the scene for the gunfight to take place in. And it's something that, you know, some games don't do a good job of doing. And I felt like that this game had a really nice combination of fight, quiet moment to think about what just happened, fight, and so on and so on. And it's got a really good flow and pace and route to it. They did a great job with that. There we go, take out Mr. Cowboy Hat for the 9th time. But I'm not going to lie to you guys, the movement is annoying as fuck. The weapon system's kind of interesting here, and it really showcases how much I really don't like Modern Warfare. In this game, when you pick up a weapon, you can go to a box and then you can swap between any of the weapons that you've picked up, so you can essentially choose your class on the campaign. This is something that Call of Duty took them a decent amount of time to get. We had to wait until Black Ops 2 to get that. And then certain video games in that series don't have it. Ghosts doesn't have it. You know, I don't think... Did Infinite Warfare have it? It might have had it, Infinite Warfare. Well, Modern Warfare doesn't have it, you know. The most recent Call of Duty doesn't have this feature that makes the campaign have replay value and makes it more fun for people that want to pick what they want. The one criticism I have of how the weapon box works in this game is that I don't think you can change the optic on the weapon. Weapons come with red dots or iron sights, and you can't flip between the two. And if you can, I just didn't figure out how to do so. That's like my only critique when it comes to the box. But in 2009, we weren't seeing this mechanic that often. And it's a good mechanic that deserves to be used. There's also this... You see how on the map in the bottom left, there is a pistol that's just glowing there, the icon for it? Those are weapon caches that you can pick up that will give you access to new weapons. And here is the box that lets you use a whole bunch of stuff. And you'll notice, I have almost every gun in the game. The reason I have every gun in the game is because I recorded this after I beat the game, because of course the capture problem. So I've gone and chose this pistol, which you might be thinking, Chris, why would you run around with a pistol? Look at the hipfire reticle on this pistol when it comes on the screen. The reticle is so close together when you use this gun. I had to hipfire it and test it out. And when you start shooting, the reticle does bloom. But this pistol, albeit not very damaging, is quite accurate for a pistol. So I wanted to do a little bit of an homage here to a friend of mine called Ryan from the Time Cop crew. Because I'll never forget on Bad Company 2, there was this wonderful moment where me and Aiden were watching him play the multiplayer. He was playing Rush on Eureka Harbour, I think it was called. The level I used to call Africa because I'm dyslexic. He was playing on that level and he got into a gunfight with somebody. He had a rifle. They got close to him, he swapped to his pistol, and he hip-fired and killed them. And me and Aiden were just gobsmacked because we were COD boys. And we came to this game thinking that hipfire was worthless and you shouldn't do it because it'd just get you killed unless you were using steady aim and a submachine gun. Whereas Ryan didn't even try to ADS and he kind of blew our minds. And when I look back on it, he was ahead of his time. But at the time it was just like, what the fuck, how did you win that? You didn't even aim. That's how it felt, you know, in our minds. You didn't even aim and you won that. But that just goes to show how different Battlefield is from COD and how the mechanics work. And I actually got myself in a bit of a bind here when I was recording, ladies and gentlemen, because I didn't have any ammo for the sequence coming up, and I should have gone back and got the ammo box and then hit the checkpoint. And then, of course, the checkpoint was being an absolute arsehole. I couldn't get to a position of cover to get a new weapon, and I died 3 or 4 times. It was really frustrating. So in the end, I decided to skip the fight, and I showed you a nice little shortcut. I did it on the first recording, of course, and had no problems, but you'll never see that because recording works in mysterious ways. But I really do like this gun. Cool looking gun. There's some nice animations on this game too. You'll notice the bottom right on the hood there's the rounds and then there's the grenades on the side. The grenade throw in this game is so weird and delayed and clunky and slow and obnoxious and strange. But fortunately I spent a decent amount of time playing the multiplayer and it turns out that my brain remembered the throw arc and what have you. I don't know if you can shoot the grenades like you can do in Battlefield 5, but certainly something to try out if you want to. This segment here, there's tons of enemies near the wood, so feel free to get on top of them if you can. I really wish you could tell the map to go in the top left. It's one of the things I've wanted in Battlefield since the beginning of time, because it's just more natural to look there for me. And I don't know in this game if you can increase the map size, but it's one of the first things I recommend you do in Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, because you can give yourself a whole host of extra awareness, because the map can be really useful, especially in the single player. I didn't think the map was going to be this useful, but it really is. As we get into a gunfight here and do some hip firing and see what we can do. Oh, there he is. Watch this for clipping. No bullet penetration on that invisible wall, or so it seems. But the song that I use at the beginning of this, I believe, is from Battlefield 4 in the campaign. It was the most beautiful piece of music in that game, I thought. And I wanted to use it again because it's a stellar tune. And I think I'd completely forgotten that it was a tribute to a developer that passed away, I think. It's even named after him. One of the DICE members who, you know, didn't make the future games. And it's just such a... If you watch any of the Battlefield YouTubers, you'll hear them use it a lot because it's so iconic and it's so good. It's got a great build to it. It's just superb. It's one of those pieces that I don't think I'll ever forget, and I don't think I'll ever not want to listen to it once it starts. It's just got such a great hook. And it's a great way to be remembered for all the hard work that player did, that developer did, sorry. But push forward. Be careful of these people. There we go, guy just there. Horrible aim from me. That's something worth mentioning too. I couldn't calibrate the sensitivity in this game the way I really wanted to, so I just kind of got used to a sensitivity that wasn't ideal. Luckily, it doesn't really cost me too much. and we can get on with it. But there's going to be a transition here, guys, because this is where the checkpoint was, and now I'm going to show you the cheeky sequence break. So, I say sequence break, all I'm going to do is skip a fight. I got really frustrated on this moment. I didn't want to do this level again, because I didn't find it to be all that interesting to begin with. And let alone when I saved myself into this corner. But if you come down onto this creek bed, it's going to tell you to get back in bounds. So if you come over here to the right, you can reset the 10-second timer. Just over by the bridge there, and then you can swing underneath this bridge here, and then we're going to move our way up this embankment. The one problem in Battlefield when it comes to surviving a technique, what I'm showing you here, is that a lot of the stuff you see is, it breaks, it's destructible. So you can put yourself behind a big fence and feel invincible for about half a second, and then the fence is gone and you're getting hit. And maybe if I would have walked further up the hill I would have been safer, but you're about to see me take a lot of damage really quickly. And over here there is a trigger for the end of the level, and it goes to a weird screen, and that was it. And you might be thinking, oh, that looks like you died. Well, when you die on this game, your character throws his hands up on the screen and he drops his gun. So that's the difference between the trigger. And usually in a walkthrough, I wouldn't have shown you that weird brown screen that it goes to there, but I didn't want it to look like I was hiding something, and I wanted it to be seamless. But then it transitions into a stealth mission, where we get to wait for thunder, and then we get to shoot these guys with a rifle, which I'm almost certain I've done this in a Call of Duty, but I can't remember which one. And it's one of those classic moments, isn't it? A sniper sequence of subterfuge and masking the shots with noises. I've done this in Sniper Elite and probably Ghost Warrior and a few other games. But this is a fun segment, and I do like that he's perched to the left of you, spotting for you. It's a really interesting touch. But let's talk about Battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. I can't really give you too many tips about this game because it's not that difficult, even though it can be, can be a bit tricky at times if you're very aggressive. And because there's more cinematic moments here, I would just be telling you what's about to happen, and you can see that with your eyes. If you're not a fan of commentary, guys, I will be popping up a video that's not commentated, but most of the people that have stuck with my channel and hung around, they do so because of the conversation, because of the discussion.
Good job, buddy.
So Bad Company 2 comes out, and a younger version of myself ends up getting it. I don't remember why I got it. I think I rented it. I was an achievement whore at the time. The prospect of doing the campaign for some easy achievements was definitely something I was up to. And there was a couple of ones for the multiplayer which I ended up jumping onto and trying out with a friend of mine, a friend called Lummy, and we played with Lummy and another guy. And our very first match was a game of Conquest on a map that I think uses the assets from the second to last level of this game. I'm going to talk about it later on when we get there, so if you know what it's called, guys, and you're a Bad Company 2 master, an expert, and you know it all, please feel free to drop some knowledge there, because I think they use assets there, because it really reminded me of it. And then after we played Conquest, which I don't think I did very well in, I think I just kind of, ran around all shell-shocked. Oh, look at this! Randomly sparking tyres. I thought that was weird. A couple of moments like that of just bizarre stuff happening. A guy humping a turret later on, look forward to that. So we did some Conquest, and then we went into Rush, and I think I picked the Recon kit to see what it was about, and then I discovered the airstrike that the Recon got, and I always thought that was kind of bullshit. Coming from Call of Duty, where it took a couple of kills to get an airstrike, being able to constantly bombard an area with goggles, it felt cheap as shit, and as soon as I discovered that, I thought, I'm going to try and see what I can do with this class. And played a little bit of that. We played on Isle of Innocentes, I think it was called, Isle of Innocence, which was the kind of autumnal area. Really, really cool area. Oh, by the way, guys, there are flare traps here, and if you trip them, you will get into an engagement. I tripped the first one to show you the engagement, to see what happens. You can avoid the rest of them, and it's really easy to do so too. You don't have to take it slow, you don't have to spot them or anything. You can move while mashing the E key, or mashing A probably on controller, and you'll diffuse it as you walk through it, and you don't even have to look for them. So all you do is just mash on examine, and you'll diffuse it as you move through it, which is a really, really cool tip. A cool section this as well, with some of the god rays, and you can hear the sound of the jungle and everything. It's a good sequence. But played on Isle of Innocentes, or whatever it's bloody called. Started sniping. Understood the bullet drop, because you had to, make it a little bit higher and such. And that's a really, really good level for discovering those mechanics and learning them, because there's a lot of those missile launchers that are mounted on the ground that are anti-air and anti-vehicle. And when people get on those, they're not moving, so you can just line it up and test your shot and everything. And had a really, really good game and had a really, really good time and thought, damn, the sniping in this game is really satisfying. And that's all I pretty much did in that game until it came to leveling up the other classes, where I leveled the engineer and I was dropping the A2 mines? I forget what they're called. There was some anti-tank mines you could drop. And I'll never forget, the very beginning of Eureka Harbour, there's that long road that leads from the enemy spawn into that first town that you've got to defend. And if you drop them all on that road, you'll get multiple Humvee kills or tank kills or whatever it was, and you could get some serious points for doing that. So that was a really, really fun class to play, especially on that level when you knew what you were doing. And then I don't really remember what I did with Assault or why you would want to play Assault. They had some good guns, but I don't really remember the hook of what made them that fun. Maybe they just had the best guns, you know, for what I like to do. But I did Assault for a little while to level that guy up. And I did Medic. And Medic, I didn't like the guns. I think I ended up using the G3 because it was a gun you could use on all classes and it was one that was kind of okay. But the reviving was so sick. I'd never played a game where you could pick people up that quickly. And it made it so different. I think one of the reasons why it's easier not to get frustrated at Battlefield, even though Battlefield is very frustrating, especially when you play it for a decent amount of time and you play it at a higher level. Like, I think on a surface level, the reason why Battlefield isn't as frustrating as something like Call of Duty or another shooter is when you die, there's a chance you can come back. And there's a chance you can salvage your stats if you're a stat person. So there's always this hope. There's this, like, optimistic demise that happens where there's always a chance you're gonna come back from it and not die. And I feel like when there is that chance, it takes the edge off the death. It takes that pride killer, that little knife that goes into your ego every time somebody beats you. It kind of dulls that a little bit. And I think it's so useful and so pivotal to that game. And the reason why it attracts so many casual people is because it doesn't feel as important when you die. And Battlefield also has this huge emphasis on playing the objective. People are obsessed at to play the fucking objective. PTFO. I'd never even heard of that, even though I'm an objective player a lot of the times in most games that I play, until I played Battlefront. And I'm more so a Battlefront player than I am a Battlefield player. I've put a lot more time into that game. But they're very similar. They're very similar in so many ways. But it's just so interesting, isn't it? That it can attract such a casual market and have such dedicated hardcore fans too. It's kind of the master of that, I think. And one of the things that I really like about that is I feel like that's what every game should be. And I feel like Battlefield and Battlefront are kind of the only games now that are really fully channeling that. And it can be frustrating, don't get me wrong. There's nothing worse than being on a team where people can't shoot. Being on a team where they're just not doing anything and they're not helping you. You pick up 10 people and then go down once and then everybody ignores you. How many times has that happened? Happened to me yesterday, that. It's just like, I understand you think you're fucking good. I understand you want to get all these kills that you're not getting because I'm watching you not get kills. You notice I'm higher than you on the goddamn scoreboard. You notice I've got way more kills than you do. Maybe if you pick me up, our team will stand a better chance, you know? Because I always look at it like that, and I always have. When I'm a noob on a game, especially a Battlefield game, if I'm near the guy that's at the top of our team who's wrecking, I'm going to risk my life to pick him up. Because he knows what he's doing. I fucking don't. I'm just running around thinking it looks beautiful and having a good time and trying to figure stuff out and still doing pretty well myself. You want to salvage the guys that are working, that are helping, you know, and there's such a casual level, it's incredible. Such a casual level. But my favourite sniper, I think, in Bad Company 2 is it called the SVU? It was the Russian sniper that had the arrows for the scope. It had like a tower of arrows to tell you the distance. I loved that rifle. Putting like those Magnum rounds on it, I think you could to make it do even more damage. And just doing that and just playing the shit out of it. Always playing Rush. I was not a Conquest player. We played Rush exclusively, played with friends, played solo as well, playing solo Rush and having a really good time supporting the team and, you know, trying to spot people and mark people and drop air supports and help them and get in there on the objective when we could to plant the bomb and everything, and just a really, really cool time. The thing I enjoyed the most in Bad Company 2's multiplayer was the counter-sniping, I think. because there was just something really fun about it. Because the recon was such a popular class, it attracted a wide variety of skilled players. So there were the people who were really good at it, who you generally didn't see because they were too busy killing your team and doing a superb job at that. And then there's, you know, Timmy new guy, who's just stood out in the open on the building site on Eureka, thinking he's not going to get seen when he's a huge ghillie suit on top of a building that has no other detail. And then you just pop his head, and then a minute later he gets back up there and you pop his head again, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, guys, what are you doing? Why do you do that? But so much fun. The only thing I didn't do in that game, as far as what I was trying to do, was there was an achievement for killing people with buildings, and I never got that because you had to play, I think, a specific class to get the dynamite to drop the buildings, and I just never got lucky enough. So I'll always remember that. Much like that knife animation just then. Does anybody remember how delayed that knife animation is? You press it, and then like 5 seconds later he does the most slowest flick knife thing that breaks doors and fences and shit, and it blew my mind the first time I used it. When I used that knife to get rid of a chain link fence to move through an area, such a cool idea, such an innovation for my young brain. Like I thought it was spectacular, because I just didn't play games where you could do that, and that was what this was all about. Those instances of destruction, that instance of leveling the playing field, like just like this. Look at that, break a door. Nowadays, breaking doors is nothing impressive, and you can do it in like every other game. But at this point, I'd never seen it before. It was so fresh and so different. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rent Bad Company 2 on Xbox 360, and I'm going to look to see if I can find my stats, because in my head at the time I felt like I was doing pretty well. But I get the feeling that if I look at my stats, they're probably awful and I was just delusional. Because it happens, you know, you think you were a beast at something when you were younger, and then you look at it as you've got older and you're like, Jesus Christ, that was awful. So I'm looking forward to checking it out to see what, like, if they even tell you your score per minute and your objective caps and your revives and stuff, and the longest distance of the kill that I got, and, you know, the time spent and everything, because usually Battlefield's really good when it comes to stats. I'm using the shotgun here, guys, because it came with those gold rounds, and those gold rounds are extra damage, so I wanted to try them out because they reminded me of Magnum rounds on the rifle. And this shotgun can be really good, and then at other times it just doesn't do anything, so it's kind of all over the place. Not the biggest fan of the FOV as well when you use it, but that's just a constant. But keep on pushing forward, keep on kicking ass. The bullets on the minimap, of course, are an area for you to refill your ammunition, so if need be, do so. And a piece of advice, guys, if you carry a launcher with you almost all the time, whenever a helicopter turns up or a vehicle turns up, you can just hit it with the launcher and preempt it and kill it before it flies away, which is a godsend in some missions. And also, do not challenge the guns on these things. They kill you almost instantly. It's really, really rough. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to see those stats, and I'm definitely going to look back into checking it out, just to see if I was as good at Bad Company 2 as I felt like I was at the time. And then after that, I covered Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 on the channel. I played the... Was Metro in Battlefield 3, guys? I played the beta for Battlefield 3, and I didn't want to snipe, because I'd done that, you know. My sniping days were behind me. I'd had a really, really good time on Bad Company 2. I wanted to kind of learn to play proper Battlefield, where I got stuck in and beat people with my gun and, you know, pushed the objectives and was aggressive and everything, the way I like to play most games. This is an interesting one, this, guys. There's a lot of spawns here, and because you can't lay down, you have to be careful how close you get to this wall, or you won't have any cover and they'll just kill you. I had a really, really cool clip here of me just flicking between guys and putting everybody down, and I ended up dying to like 3 bullets. It was one of the quickest deaths I've seen. And that guy keeps faking me out because he's bumming that turret, but he's dead. But the game doesn't know it yet. So it's just like, who the fuck's shooting me? And it's not him, because we know he's dead. It's just a guy over there ignoring my team and murking me. But when I jump over this wall, he's like flopping back and forth. Look at him. See him? He's having a real good time. It's the strange parts, isn't it? Like, what is he doing? Video games. Come on, DICE. But I played the beta for Battlefield 3, and it was Metro. I didn't like it. Like, I just didn't get it. Going from sniping and understanding the maps and kind of controlling the zones in Rush, jumping into whatever it was, Team Deathmatch or Conquest or something, in Metro, it was... I think I played 3 games and then just turned it off and called it a bad day. And I put one of them on YouTube, I think. I put my first game up where I was just running around confused in a live commentary, and it was just... I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like anything. I really didn't. I just didn't like it. I thought the campaign was okay. And then in Battlefield 4, I didn't touch the multiplayer, even though it did look really good with the Levolution and everything. I just had such a bad experience. There you go, 3 bullets on him, go down, then we get the MP443. That's the first moment that you use that gun. That's the time I realised that its hip fire was so close that I wanted to use it. And then now we've transitioned to a snow level where we can use the mounted gun with mouse deceleration, so enjoy. Lots of vehicles to blow up, lots of destructibility. Absolutely gorgeous for its time and really, really well realised. So I didn't play Battlefield 4. Probably should have, because all I hear is how good Battlefield 4 was. But have you noticed now everybody loves the last game? You notice that? It seems to be with every community. Every single community hates the new game, loves the old ones. And then when the new game becomes the old one, everyone gets a new appreciation for it. It's such a strange thing, isn't it, how we kind of cherry-coat our vision. And I don't know, do you think games are getting worse? Are games just getting worse so it's actually true? Or is it just... We're so expectant of something specific, and when we don't get it, we're so quick to just be like, oh, this one's crap and the old one was great. But I see it with COD, and I see it with Battlefield a lot. It just seems so strange to me how everything gets better in reference. Like, Modern Warfare is a big one. The whole reason I'm doing this right now, guys, is because I don't want to play Modern Warfare. The game is so miserable and awful and just the opposite of fun. It's driven me to Battlefield, a game that's been absolutely murdered right now, which I'm going to talk about in a moment after we've got off the Battlefield 4 subject. But then I got Battlefield 1, and Battlefield 1 had a really, really interesting campaign with the war stories that I liked a lot, and it looked beautiful. And I played a little bit of the multiplayer, but I didn't get a chance to play too much of it, and I really regret that, because I think that Battlefield 1, as much as I didn't really like the idea of... Didn't they add, like, random hip spray or something? There's something about the shooting in Battlefield 1 that makes it more RNG than the good players would like, and it can lead to you should win a gunfight, you're on target, but you don't because your bullets just don't hit. Something I've experienced in Battlefield 5. But then again, something I've experienced in every Battlefield, which leads me to something I've not mentioned, which is... At the beginning of this walkthrough, when I was shooting with that Type 100 at that guy, and my reticle looked like it was on him, and none of the bullets were going anywhere near him, I feel like that's my experience with all the Battlefields up to the most recent ones. I feel like the guns have always kind of had that ghost bullet effect of you should be on target, you're aiming at them, but you don't hit them. That was a wonderful moment of collision. I feel like Battlefield 3 had it, and I didn't like it there. I feel like Battlefield 4 had it, and I didn't like it there. Bearing in mind here, guys, this is all console at the moment. I played these on console. If you're on PC, it might be vastly different. It probably is. But I always felt like in Battlefield, when I started aiming at people, my aim just didn't matter. I felt like the game was deciding who won. I didn't feel like I was ever accurate. I didn't feel like my bullets ever went where I fired. And I always had a real big disconnect between being accurate. And that's why I like the snipers so much in Bad Company 2. Because in Bad Company, the snipers went where you aimed them, and if you hit someone in the head, they died. And I really liked that. And I think when I swapped to the other classes and I was using things like the G3 and the fucking iron sight's bouncing everywhere and you're not hitting a bullet and you're just like, what's going on right now? Like, it always felt like you were getting robbed. And Battlefield 1 was lesser so that, but still that. And Battlefield 5 feels lesser so that, but still that. Especially with the time to kill now that they've changed. So it's just this weird thing of... I've always kind of felt like Battlefield was a bit loose on where the bullets went. A little bit fast and loose. And I feel like that's part of the charm that makes it so... You know, that gives it that authenticity and also gives it that appeal for both hardcore and casual people. Because not every gun was a laser. You know, one of the things you'll notice in this game is that there's a lot of recoil on the guns. You can make them fire one bullet, you can feather the trigger, and you can get rid of a lot of that recoil. But fundamentally, these guns bounce. They bounce, they flash, everything shakes. The whole thing is like, oi dickhead, you're in a war zone. This is what it's like. You know, it's not meant to be. This is, you know, a movie where the hero never misses, even though, you know, Battlefield now has kind of got a lot closer to that than it has to all the shaking and everything. And it's that weird thing of, to me, COD was always the game that was precise, the bullets went where they went, and I was very confident in my aim, whereas Battlefield wasn't. Battlefield was this more realistic, more authentic, more bombastic kind of You're in a war, you're panicking, your gun barrel is bent, and nothing works. Whereas now, I feel like it's the complete opposite. I feel like after Modern Warfare drove me to Battlefield 5, I feel like everything that I went to COD for, Battlefield 5 does better. And everything Battlefield used to do really good, Battlefield 5 doesn't do very well. So it's this weird thing of everyone in the Battlefield community is having issues with Battlefield 5. They're really, really vocal, and I think they're right. I think almost everything that gets said has got a foundation in experienced players saying how the game is and how it should be, and how DICE are ruining it for no real reason and doing things that no one asks for. And I feel like they're almost universally correct, most of it. But I'm still having a good time because the shit that they want is the shit that I don't really care about. And the stuff that's in this game that people don't really understand is the stuff that I like in some ways. So I've ended up coming to this game that is universally being touted as the next Battlefront 2 for essentially being a game that's being ruined by several bad decisions, and everybody playing it is essentially just this tortured spouse. But I'm having a lot of fun in spite of all these issues. So it's a really, really interesting, strange situation to be in, especially coming from Call of Duty, because Modern Warfare is a game that they keep trying to convince us is the best selling this, the best selling that. There's more players playing, more playtime being banked and all these other things. I don't know a single person who likes playing that game. I don't know anybody that can play that game at length without hating it and wanting to do something else, because the game itself it kind of just drives you to not want to play it. I've never wanted to play a Call of Duty so little than that game, because I aim at people in that game, I shoot those people, I'm as accurate as I possibly can be because I'm on a fucking mouse now, and I still lose. And it makes no sense. And it's so frustrating. And there's so many things in it that are hurting good players, and no one's having a good time, you know. That's not even mentioning the skill-based matchmaking and a million other issues that I don't need to go into because this is a Battlefield video, but fundamentally, I left Call of Duty to play Battlefield and found more Call of Duty in Battlefield. And I think that that's a huge concern because the Battlefield guys don't want that. The same way the COD guys don't want Battlefield, yet that's what we got in Modern Warfare. So it's this weird kind of wife swap thing that's gone off. This is an interesting mission here as well. I really, really like the snowy levels on this, but there is a section coming up where you're in a vehicle. It's an absolute nightmare because the more you shoot your gun, the more snow you kick up and the more you can't see, and it's on the side of a cliff. So be very careful on that sequence. But really cool section here. Clearing the buildings, pushing, trying to find your targets, kicking ass. Some of the iron sights in this game are so bad. You know, it's enough to blind a man. It's terrible things. But this one's not too bad. That's the reason I'm clinging to this gun. Lots of bullets, decent iron sight. I'll use that. Safety in comfortable iron sights. And that leads us to Battlefield 5, which is such a polarising game. So I rented Battlefield 5 at launch because I wanted to cover it for the channel. I'd covered Battlefield 1, I really liked the campaign in Battlefield 1. I heard terrible things about Battlefield 5 and I was really worried, and they turned out to be majoritively true. Battlefield 5's campaign was probably the worst Battlefield campaign I've ever played. I just couldn't really enjoy it. It was a strange left turn into everything Battlefield doesn't really do that well. It also had a lot of AI problems and spawn problems, and when you played it on the harder difficulty, it just compounded in just a really shit experience. It looked beautiful though, I'll give it that much. It looked beautiful, and I suppose, you know, that's something. But I didn't enjoy it. I streamed it, played it on stream. I might have even shared some of that video on the channel. I decided not to cover it. I didn't really want to play the multiplayer. Well, that's a lie, actually. I wanted to play the multiplayer, but I didn't want to play it on my own. I wanted to play with friends, because Battlefield to me is all about being in a squad. Most multiplayer is, to be fair. But fundamentally, Battlefield, I've always really played it with friends outside of Bad Company 2, when I used to run solo as a recon guy. And my friend at the time had it and was going to play it, so I just said to him, well, when you get online, if you throw me a message, I'll jump on with you and I'll see how good it is, and I'll maybe record it and share it on the channel. In the end, I don't think he ever got time to go online, so I never went online either, and I didn't play it. I never played any of Battlefield 5 at launch. So skip forward 2 years, or a year, or whatever it is, and I got it in the Christmas sales this year, 2020. Beginning of 2020, it was in the sales. I got it for 10 quid. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to benchmark my new PC. So I just upgraded my PC, I got a new CPU, and I wanted to see, with my GPU, what I could handle on a game that is notorious for being CPU bound. And I tried to play Battlefield 1 on my old CPU, and it was choppy. It was really bad. I couldn't even play the campaign at a respectable amount that I would want to play on. So I got it for the purposes of that, and potentially, maybe, if it ran well and I liked the mouse and keyboard, I was going to maybe cover the campaign, just do it like I'm doing this, where I don't really think too much, I just record it all, put it in a video, do some talking, bang it on the channel. The people that really like this kind of stuff will watch it, the people that don't will avoid. And it ran okay. It didn't run as good as I would have liked it to have run, but it runs, you know, I get anywhere between 110 frames and about 150 frames. I wish it was a constant 140, but it's not. It does go up and down. When I try to stream it, I drop to 90 and 100, and it does get a bit rough then, but fundamentally, just playing it, I get a decent amount of performance for it to be competitive. And when I picked it up, I noticed on Reddit that they were mentioning that there was going to be a 5.2 TTK change, a change to the time to kill in the game. So I avoided playing it until that happened because I didn't want to get used to a faster time to kill, and then they change it and then immediately be pissed off like everybody else is. By the way, guys, this moment right now, this is a rail segment where you're shooting a grenade launcher, I think it is, and when you turn the grenade launcher reticle, it turns your camera too and makes it hard to see where you're going, so it's a little bit awkward this when it comes to doing it. And if you shoot, you will kick up snow, and the reason there was a transition just then is coming up there is a really sharp left turn that I didn't see because all the fucking snow in my face from all the explosions, and I just drove straight off the cliff like a lunatic. So be very careful on here, there's a left-hand turn. Best thing to do is probably to use your map, but I wasn't very experienced with using the map in the campaign, so I didn't, and I ended up getting killed. So it was a heads-up awareness fail on my part, so just be very careful. Cool segment though, I do like this section. So I delayed playing until 5.2 went through, and then everybody said it was awful. Everyone everywhere is like, just revert it dice, it's terrible, it's awful, it's terrible. So I started playing, jumped into some breakthrough on the Pacific maps, playing Wake Island and the Pacific one and Iwo Jima, I think it's called. Playing those ones, and running around as a medic with the Sten, which is a very accurate submachine gun, but still a submachine gun, which is not really the ranges that the Pacific maps really benefit. And I played a decent amount of it. I was having a pretty good time. I liked it, because I feel like I like the movement, I like the shooting, I like the HUD, I like the feel of the hit markers. I'd never played on a 60 Hz server with such low ping, so the connection always felt really, really good. I felt invincible unless I bumped into a tank or a fucking plane, because, you know how bad they are. I'm not even going to start talking about that shit, or I'll spend the rest of the hours hating on those people. But I felt like every time I got into a gunfight, I won. I felt like my aim was better than everyone else's, and I felt powerful. And this was when the time to kill was much slower than it should be. So in the old time to kill, I probably would have felt even better. And I'd really like it to revert it, but they're not gonna, because they're stubborn like that. But I was using the Sten, I was trying to level my medic up, and there was a challenge on the Tides of War to unlock another submachine gun. And I'd seen this submachine gun because it had killed me a few times. It was called the Nambu Type 2A, and I don't really know much about World War II guns that much. I know a decent amount that have been in games, but I've never even heard of this one. It fires so quickly. I wanted this gun, because from when I'd bumped into it in close range, it must have fired twice as fast as the gun I was using. And my thoughts were that it wasn't going to be good at range, but up close it was going to be like a shotgun. It was going to be a shotgun SMG, practically. This segment right here, ladies and gentlemen, is just a defense moment. Going to be a ton of guys coming from left and right. Make sure you fell them as quickly as you can. And I think there might even be a helicopter, so make sure you have a rocket just in case. But stay on the defensive line, stay near your team, don't get too aggressive, make sure you're in cover and you'll be fine. So I start doing these challenges to get this gun, and it's like a 10-step thing of doing various different tasks, capping flags, getting squad points, doing revives, healing people, doing damage, getting kills, so on and so forth. And I unlocked that gun, and it's a monster. It's an absolute monster. I thought it wasn't going to be that good at range, but it turns out it's good to about 40 meters. Anything other than that, and then the time to kill that they've changed, is going to make it a little bit more of a hindrance. But fundamentally, this is one of the strongest guns in the game, and I could immediately tell. And I could tell from having no specializations on it that it was going to be really, really good. Because it melts. And my playstyle in Battlefield 5 is to get in people's faces. I'm rushing trenches, I'm getting as close as I can, I'm being aggressive, I'm using smoke, I'm essentially helping the team push. That's my job. That's what I've kind of gone towards. Do you notice how the back of the iron sight's all trembly? I know it's snowing and everything, but is there any need for it to look like that? It really put me off using this gun, even though the iron sight wasn't that bad. So yeah, if you're a rusher and you like being aggressive, this new gun, the Nambu, is going to be your best friend. I unlocked it and started using it and realised it didn't have the downsides I thought it would have. Has a lot of the pros. It's just really difficult to not use this gun because it is such a really, really good tool of getting the job done. So I played with it for about 2 to 3 hours and I ended up getting it gold, which was the first gold gun I've ever got in a Battlefield, and nothing says World War II like gold ornate guns. But it was really funny because the gun was just monstrous, and I think it needs to be nerfed, I really do. But at the same time, I think it's a lot of fun. And people have been saying it's one of those guns where it's a lot of fun to play as, but not fun to play against. And truth be told, I've not really had too much of an issue dying to it personally, because when you're using it, if you have better aim or you're using the faster firing profile and you get luckier hip fire, you beat most people. So I'll die to it occasionally, but I don't really blame the gun because I'm using the gun, so I know the strengths and I know the weaknesses. But what I would do to it, if I could, to make it a little bit more competitive with everything else, is I would make it so that unless you specialise in hipfire, its hipfire is not very good. Outside of being up close and outside of, getting a lucky spread, hip-firing the gun should have to be specialised to do that. You should have to pick the left-hand tree. That's how I would change that, firstly. And if you specialise in the left-hand tree, I feel like the ADSing and the recoil and the range should be reduced for the precise mode, because I feel like you should be using it up close, you should be using it as a burst of DPS that's really good at hip firing but is weaker at aiming. And I feel like that's how the gun should work, and if that was done to it, I think it would be a lot less bullshit. Like, I don't think that gun should be able to be as accurate as it is at anything over 15 to 20 meters. You should have to be tapping the trigger, and there are a lot of guns in Battlefield 5 where you do have to tap the trigger just to be functional with it because it's such a specific recoil pattern, even though a lot of the recoil is random. And you don't have to do that with a Nambu. Like, I hold the trigger on the Nambu and I control the recoil, and I've been playing this game for like a day. I've not been there a long time. I'm a noob, I'm a Christmas noob, and I'm controlling recoil on this gun because it just doesn't have the recoil it deserves. And it stands glaringly to me as a gun that is just really, 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 really strong because all the other guns have been made worse thanks to these updates. The gimmick of this level, by the way, guys, is unless you're in shelter or near a fire, your screen will freeze over and you'll die from exposure. So you have to get near flame, you have to put yourself inside to keep warm, and once the effect leaves your screen, you can move on to the next segment. It's actually a pretty interesting section, this. I like this one a lot. It's one of those mechanics that kind of shows up and goes away but leaves a decent effect and a decent taste in your mouth. So I've been using the Nambu a lot and having just a ton of fun with it. I've been using it on the Pacific maps, which are all kind of long engagements outside of a couple of choke points. And once I get to those choke points, I have way more fun, but moving between cover when everybody's using these longer range weapons can be a bit of a nightmare. There are some weapons in Battlefield 5's multiplayer so far, from my experience, they really stand out. And of course, every game is going to have its meta and have its guns that shine more so than the others. But the ones in this one really, really stand out to me. Like, I've been killed so much by the Lewis gun. I don't think I've ever died to any other light machine gun. Like, the Bar has just recently come out, and that's a very good gun as well. I used that the other day. It was very strong. But the Lewis gun is just, you see that gun in the kill feed all the time. It's a very effective gun. I've never used it, but I'm assuming there's just something about it that makes it really good, because it's lethal and a lot of people use it. Same with the STG. The STG, I think, is the best gun in the game. It's beat me up close when I was using a Nambu and I wasn't missing, So for me, that's the gun that's like, Jesus Christ. If I put that gun on, I think I'd shit on everybody. Because it feels so strong to die to it, because at mid-range is where it should be strong, it beats you. And then up close, it fucking beats you too. And I just don't get how. And it could be just, getting battlefielded and RNG and a few other things. Occasionally it'll be that your aim wasn't good enough and they got more headshots. But I just feel like the STG is incredibly strong. And yet when I watch experienced players, veteran players, they say that the STG is in a good place now, because it used to be kind of hit and miss. It used to be overpowered, then it was underpowered, and it got nerfed and over-nerfed and things like that. Whereas at this moment it's kind of at a spot where it deserves to be. But from my experience, from my perspective, I think that gun's better than the Nambu, because it's just a gun that whenever I'm up close and they have that gun, they beat me. And I've watched the footage back. I'm on target first, I'm shooting first, and I still lose to it. It just feels incredibly strong. And it might just be one of those things. I might have had one of those days where it was just for some reason that gun was winning every time. But that gun feels very, very strong. And then, of course, the Type 2 is very good too. Gun is really, 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 really strong. But the thing with the medic class that I noticed was, I didn't realise that the only person that could heal to full was the medic. Everybody else gets one healing pack, and then you have to do various things to get healed, which is this new system that they're calling attrition. And I didn't know the game worked like that. I picked the medic because I wanted to revive people, and then I got really surprised when the revive was ludicrously slow, and I died trying to fucking do it, even though I smoked it and somebody was covering me. Like, I don't know why they've done that. They've changed some fundamental things that I'm not really all that certain as to why, or if anybody wanted them, because they seem really strange to me. I like just stabbing a dude on the ground with a needle and then getting up. On the flip side, one of the areas I think Battlefield 5 has done a really, really good job of is everyone can revive now, which I think is really cool, because it means that you don't get ignored if there's no medic around you. And don't get me wrong, you still get ignored because nobody revives, and when they do, they don't cover themselves or clear the area, so they just run to try and pick you up and then get surprised when they get shot, which I'll never understand, because people camp bodies hard in that game, yet people just don't think. They just run up altruistically trying to pick a dude up and then just get murked, which is really, really strange. But I don't think it should work the way it does. I think the revive that the medic has is the revive that normal people should do, every other class, maybe just the standard one that they get, that really slow revive, and then I think the medic should just stab them with a needle. Because before the Nambu turned up, the medic had one glaring benefit, but as for everything else, I feel like everything else was more powerful. I feel like the medic class was kind of a crutch class on one side, and it was its kit. At any point you can heal damage, which is really, really good, but for everything else, it has nothing, no answer to vehicles. It's got really nothing for long range until the jungle carbine came along, and the jungle carbine is absolutely ridiculous. That gun is so good. And here we have the obligatory tank level. This is one of my least favourite missions in the game, and it's just because I don't like vehicles. And I know what you're thinking, Chris, you're playing Battlefield, how can you not like vehicles? Well, you'd be surprised, guys. I hate planes, I hate tanks, I hate all of it, I really do. And I don't understand it. I think that's the thing that irks me most. DICE have got this fetish for putting in this no skill, no fucking hand-eye coordination necessary nonsense to allow people to do well who should never do well in games. Like, they put these vehicles in that are so easy to use, so brain-dead and so strong that anybody can jump in them and just wreak havoc. And I've dealt with this in a few games. When I was sniping in Bad Company 2, it wasn't a big deal because the tanks never really came near me. When I played Modern Warfare in Ground War, the tanks were kind of a nightmare, but at the same time, once you unlocked the right kit, you could threaten them. When I played Battlefront 2, the tanks used to be a problem until the weak spots were made a lot better, and then the tanks in that game have never really been an issue, especially when Ion Torpedo was functional. Like, when Ion Torpedo got buffed, all I did was anti-ATSTs, anti-tanks, anti-air vehicles. I would play the heavy just to shoot out starfighters, because I don't like those players. I don't like people who pick planes for the whole purpose of just whoring kills on the ground of people trying to play the game. To me, I think those people are just the most cowardly, the most tactless dudes in any game. And I know it's an opinion piece, and I know everybody has a different one, but if you get a vehicle for the purpose of helping your team push, and you put yourself in a place that lets your team win and get objectives, then you're a good vehicle player. If you're a guy who sits on a hill 9 weeks away just shelling it for the full fucking game, or shelling the spawn, or whatever it is that you do, you can convince yourself that you're getting map control and various other things, but fundamentally you're just being a scumbag. And I just... By the way, this guy takes multiple rockets. You see this? Oh, I think I killed him then. No idea what's going on with this tank. And if you drop to 8, if you drop to 0, you die in this tank. There's no, like, getting out or anything, I don't think. You've got to commit to it. So I'm going to skip the next fight coming up because I hate the tank. Horrible vehicle. But I don't know why DICE do it. They always make overpowered vehicles. Always. And the vehicles are always introduced in a way that's just not reflective of a balanced game or a fair chance for the enemy team to contend with them. It doesn't make sense. Like on the Pacific maps, I think one of the sides has 4 planes. 4 planes! One plane can lead to a guy going 100 and 0. 100 and 0, and everyone on the ground is just absolutely terrified of it because they've nerfed the only real way of stopping them, and everything else is so easy to anti-air or to anti-ground or whatever with the plane that the plane just goes for the high values and then it can just strafe everybody else. And the thing that gets me the most, guys, when it comes to this vehicle stuff, because I can bitch about vehicles in Battlefield all fucking day, because it's like the only thing that kills me. Outside of overextending, which is 1000% my fault, I mostly die to vehicles. And it's just tedious. It's tedious because it never feels earned. This is a weird section, this. It controls really poorly on the mouse. You'll notice I'm like swaying everywhere. It's very bizarre, very drunk. But here's the part that I don't get. DICE made both Battlefront and Battlefield. Battlefront benefits from a lot of Battlefield tech. Battlefield does not benefit from a lot of tech that Battlefront has made better. And I'll never understand where there's not transparency between these two franchises. The tank in Battlefront, right? Very lethal, very dangerous. For some reason, it earns normal battle points, which is fucking stupid and should have never been the case, but always was the case, so it ensures that someone who's garbage at the game can at least get a hero. Doesn't make sense, shouldn't make sense, never will be fixed, but that's how it works. You just learn to live with it. To destroy a tank, you have to hit it with ion damage. There are certain weapons that get ion rounds, there are certain grenades that are ion, there are certain star cards that give you ion, there are certain other factors that you can use. You can use a plane, you can use a TIE fighter to kill a tank. But the best part, guys, the part that Battlefield really needs, in my opinion, is if you get behind the tank and into its ballsack, there's a weak panel. Some of the vehicles are different for where the weak points are, but fundamentally, if you get into a blind spot or a spot on the tank where it is weak, or a vehicle where it's weak, anybody can hurt it with normal gunfire. Titanfall 2, Titanfall 1, same thing. The Titans were these huge hulking menaces that were very strong. You used specific anti-Titan weapons to damage them that could do a lot of damage if they were coordinated and if you hit the weak point. But if you didn't have one of those, you could still damage them with light, small arms shooting at their weak point. The glowing bits on their back, their cockpit on the front. You could hurt them with a normal gun. You could do a lot of damage if you were a good player and you knew what you were doing. In Battlefield, you have to play a certain class to hurt the fucking tanks. You either have to use the Panzerfaust or the Dynamite with the Assault, which kills them really quickly, or the Piat. But he's the only guy that really can, him and the support. So if you're playing as the medic, I think the only thing they have is some kind of anti-tank mine, and good luck trying to get a tank to drive over the very mine you want outside of sticking them next to him when he doesn't notice and then shooting the mines and killing yourself. Like, when you're a medic, which is all I want to play in that game because I just want to run around picking people up and causing havoc with an SMG because it's really fun, I bump into so many tanks and there's nothing I can do. Nothing. I can't sneak up on the tank and stick a charge on its bumhole, do a context-sensitive interaction. I can't do that. I don't have access to that. I can't shoot a panel on the back of it with a Nambu and kill the tank in like a second because the Nambu is this overpowered broken gun. I can't do that. I have to hit it with designated class-specific stuff. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've been playing Battlefield 5 online for about 15 hours now, 20 hours maybe, and I've experienced it in almost every single game. But I seem to be the only person who can see fucking tanks. I seem to be the only person who doesn't have a problem with a tank sitting on top of a bunker that we're trying to push and no one's doing anything. Everybody's just, it must be like the bystander effect. Oh, I've seen the tank, but I'm not an assault. Someone else will get it. And then no one does. Last night, I was playing, on Wake Island, pushing the second to last point, where there's the bunker that leads to those, like, those huge cylinder stacks that are in that weird thing with the stairs. And there was a tank sat on top of the fucking pillbox, on top of the bunker, where if you take the bunker, you can spawn there and have a really, really good push for the next segment, and it's difficult to get you out. The tank was sat on top of it. Sat on top of the thing. And I'm laid down like 20 metres behind it, smoking to help the team get on the flanks, and then when my smoke had vanished and I got nothing, I was just kind of laid there being like, come on guys, you surely have seen this. Our team has tanks, our team has planes, our team has like 20 supports on the team, 10 bloody assaults on the team, and a million other things, and it's just like, what are you doing? What are they doing? And I sat there for like 5 minutes just being like, seriously? I was tempted to type in the chat, guys, can you see the fucking tank? It's the only thing stopping us from getting there. You can see the kill feed of all our team dying. You could swap classes, come back in with an explosive and put it down. And it happens all the time. It's these moments of just being like, what are you doing? What are you so afraid of? It doesn't make sense. Like, I'm praying for an assault to die so I can steal his kit and kill the tank. And then later on in the game, it turned out there was a cheater on our side. Where there was this one guy who was like 70 and fucking 4, playing as a support, running around, hip-firing, headshotting everybody. But that was on their team. Their team was getting hit by the hacker, not our team. And the tank was fine. And I just couldn't understand it. And it leads into this very strange balance of vehicles in DICE games. They make them so capable and so strong. And I don't understand who the people are that like the vehicles the way they are, outside of these people who don't do infantry combat. Because I feel like every infantry player hates fucking tanks. And I feel like every bloody tank player loves infantry. Because all they do is just walk up to them with their overpowered fortress and shit on them with a cannon. And it reminds me of the Starfighter days of Battlefront 2, back when the Starfighters had ridiculous damage towards ground people, and you just get strafed. You'd get whole matches of you pushing towards an objective, entire team on an objective, and a guy would come through and strafe it and get like 10 kills. And then at the end he'd have 100 kills. And he'd not even gone near the objective once. He'd not even got a kill with his gun. He was just in the fucking planes the whole time. And the problem with Battlefield in the vehicles, because in the vehicles it was pretty much more noticeable than the other ones, is the star cards made a big difference. The star cards augmented damage and they augmented life, and in the vehicles it was the difference between spawning in a plane to challenge him to try and kill him, and him just turning around and shitting on you with considerably better firepower. So that was one of the areas where the pay to win was way more noticeable, but of course I never played that game mode and I never went in the planes because I hated them. But it seems bizarre to me. And do you know what Battlefront 2 did? Not only did they lessen the damage that the planes did to infantry troopers to stop essentially farming ground troopers, but they took away the visibility. I watched a video the other day of a guy coming down in a plane on the Pacific, shooting into the trench in front of an objective on breakthrough, and I could see icons. I could see those emblems that show up above your head when you're spotted or when someone's looking at you, those huge red icons. They were massive. He was shooting at red icons and just getting collaterals. And I'm thinking to myself, why? It doesn't work like that anymore in Battlefront 2. They got rid of that so that they have to essentially guess. The plane shouldn't exist to constantly farm infantry. It's dog shit. It's not fun balance. It's not fun for anybody. It's awful. It's not fun to play as. It's probably fun to do, but it's one of those things where there's so much of that shit in the game that's fun to do but cancer for everybody. I don't agree with this idea that they're balancing it for the most fun experience for everyone, because they're not. These planes are going 100-0, completely uncontested, because the thing that used to deal with planes, the Fliegerfaust or something like that, I hear people talk about it all the time. I wasn't there, you know. I've only been playing this game less than a week. But I see the glaring issues. That was apparently so strong you could snipe the fucking planes, and I'd do it. I wish it was still strong. I would be a bloody Fliegerfauster Fintelfender main and wreck every plane, because it's how it fucking should be. I'm sorry, if you're going to be able to fly around and have great mobility and wreck people on the ground, the people on the ground should be able to wreck you back if you fly close enough. It's just how it should be. Planes should be for anti-vehicle, they should not be for infantry. But right now, they're so good at crushing infantry, that's all people do. And I'm telling you guys, there's nothing more frustrating than dying to planes, especially in the Pacific, because the cover's not the best, and there's just so many planes. I saw a guy, right? We were pushing the hangar section on Breakthrough on Wake Island, and if you go past that section, there's a big runway at the back, where the planes park up and where it leads to the next objective. I saw a member of my squad in a tank parked up on that runway past the objective. Our team had no presence in the hangar because we were getting killed and pushed back, and there's a big run all the way from the other side to get back if that happens. I was getting really frustrated at this guy. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? This guy has a tank. He's not on the objective. If I spawn on him, I'm behind enemy lines in their spawn, so enemies can literally be any direction of me, and I'll just be a sitting duck and get murked and have to wait for somebody to revive, which will never happen, and then respawn again. And I'm getting furious because he's not even helping put up pressure on the hangar to give us a presence in the hangar to let us cap it. So I'm getting really mad at this guy. I die again, and then I see what he's doing. And then I forgive him immediately, even though I'm still kind of pissed. So where he was parking where the planes spawn. I didn't know this. I don't know plane spawns. And when the planes were spawning in, he was killing them with the tank. So he was just getting a ton of free kills and stopping them from having an air presence. And immediately when I realised what this was, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I was like, okay, you might not be doing the immediate thing we need for victory, but you're doing the larger scale picture thing that we need to win the full skirmish. So I was kind of okay with that. But it was just kind of one of those rare moments where the vehicle comes in handy to get rid of the vehicle. And I really respected that, but at the same time, there are more instances of the tanks being douches to infantry than they are to anything else, because they're just so strong. And there's another thing that I think that Battlefront 2 does really well that Battlefield 5 could have benefited from, which is the hero system in Battlefront 2 is one of the most, I would say, argued section of that game, because they're kind of overpowered. They're a reward for doing well that makes you nigh invincible for a certain period of time, because you're way more effective than normal infantry. You do incredible damage, incredible potential for damage. A good player can make a hero last a full game and can single-handedly win that game with that hero's support. But the thing that I want them to do, I don't want a hero system in Battlefield. It's already kind of had that, where you could pick up those special kits that made you a lot stronger and gave you a gun that was bullshit. But the heroes are always on the map. You don't have to spot them. You don't have to fucking flare them. You don't have to do any of that stuff. They're always on the map. I feel like vehicles should be the same. Vehicles should always be on the map. And I can't even tell you how many times I've been snuck up on by tanks. And you must be thinking, Chris, how the hell do you get snuck up on by a tank? I don't know. That's what pisses me off. Like, I have Sennheiser headset cranked. I have my audio set to 3D headset audio. I am paying attention as much as I can, listening out for every single thing I possibly can. And I'm getting snuck up on by tanks. I'm running into, like, a bunch of leaves and some lush, verdant fields filled with all kind of plant life. And then on the other side of it, there's a tank sat there just farming my team. And I didn't even hear the guy. Didn't hear him moving. Didn't hear him firing. He's not on the map or anything. Didn't see some huge red symbol. And you can look at them, I think, and it marks them on the map and marks them on the hood and everything. And then that lasts a certain amount of time. But I feel like they should always be on the map. You should never be able to get snuck up on by a tank. It's just not how that should ever be. They're already too powerful to give them that kind of capability. And it happens all the time. How many times have you been killing a few people, pushing forward? You see a few of your team dead, you're like, I can probably smoke this and revive. And then all of a sudden you're like, that's a tank. And you're way too close to it to really do much about it. It happens all the time. But it's strange, isn't it, that there's no parity between these franchises, even though one of them does things better than the other and vice versa. There's so many things that make Battlefield unique and interesting that are really cool, and so many things that make Battlefront better than Battlefield that Battlefield could use but then doesn't. It's such a strange thing. And at the moment, the community is so against the game. They're just not having a good time with it, and I feel for them, I really do. The reason I'm having a good time is because it's way more fun than Modern Warfare, because Modern Warfare is absolutely dog shit. But fundamentally, I didn't know the game when it was better, so playing it now is all I've ever known, and I'm having a decent time with it. But what is apparently being said by a lot of these people and a lot of the community is that the new guns they're releasing, the Bar, the Nambu, the Grease gun, things like that, if you use those guns, they make the time to kill feel like it used to feel. So the game I'm playing when I'm using the Nambu is not the game as it stands. So all the things that people are critiquing and having a miserable time with, I'm not really experiencing them, because the gun that I'm using, once I get into the right range, is killing people very quickly and it's feeling very satisfying. So it's this weird thing, isn't it, of DICE have done this time to kill change that nobody wanted, that's actively hurt the community, actively hurt the game, and that if you go on the Reddit right now, all it is people complaining. Every single person is complaining about it. No one likes it at all. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So they've done this, which makes most of the guns at mid to long range feel absolutely terrible. And then they've released these guns that kill so quickly, it's almost as if the TTK wasn't changed. So it sends this really mixed signal. So at the moment the game is in a really weird state where people feel you can only use certain guns to compete because everything else is just not viable. And it'll be interesting to see what they'll do. It really will be. Because the biggest issue when it comes to companies is they don't really want to... They like to save face, and they don't like to seem like they've made a mistake or made a bad choice. Admitting failure in a company can be the end of it, you know. It can completely take away from the mission and the goal of what they're trying to push forward to the public eye. The veneer of the company is that they're constantly knowing what they're doing and they know better and that they'll be successful and it'll be better for the, you know, for the community in the long run. And DICE have said they're going to monitor it and hopefully adjust it, and it does need adjusting. There are times when I've shot at somebody with an SMG who's like 40 meters away, and I've hit him 7 times and not killed him. Hit him 7 or 8 times, no kill. And it does feel quite frustrating, but I always put it down to the fact I'm using an SMG, and SMGs in Battlefront, in my experience of the games I've played, they've never really been the choice or what you should really do. So I've kind of just chalked it up to I'm playing Call of Duty in Battlefield, and it was never meant to be that way, so it's kind of just the nature of the beast. But it turns out from people that have put more hours in it than I have, who know way more than I do, that that's just not the case. But here we go, guys. Quintessential Battlefield right now. Frostbite engine doing one of the things that DICE are obsessed with, but nobody really understands why this happens, which is extreme weather that affects the gameplay. And I can understand a weather effect like this on a claustrophobic map with humans, because humans have to guess. But when you're playing against aimbot AI that can see you through every fucking thing, why would they ever do this? This is one of the most stupid segments of the game, and this is one of the levels I really, really didn't enjoy because of this. I do not like having my mobility affected at all. I don't like it when some arbitrary game factor affects my accuracy. Like if you're on a train, I don't want my aim to be weird. I don't want any of that. I'm not looking for military simulation, I'm looking for fun. So right now, going up against enemy AI that's omniscient and barely ever misses, and I can't see a thing, is just a design choice I can't get behind. However, this level, I think, is superb. I like the wider scope of choosing your own path, and I am going to be moving through it and going to each of the segments and seeing what's there to be done. You'll notice I've got the MG3, which is another light machine gun. It doesn't have the worst iron sight, it's quite clean for Battlefield standards, and it's got a lot of bullets, so it's going to enable me to hopefully put some pressure on some enemies. There's going to be a couple of encounters with helicopters coming up that you have to be cognizant of, because there's some of the more difficult encounters in the game, because as I mentioned, I don't think the game has a lock-on for the launcher, so you have to hit them with the launcher, and it's not the easiest thing to do. It's one of the areas where it definitely cements itself aside from the other games. Like if this was COD, you'd have a stinger and it would lock on. The aiming would be done by the game, it wouldn't be a problem. Then again, when I did Modern Warfare 2, I just used a light machine gun to shoot a helicopter down, which was really fun. Hey, there's the physics. You'll notice too, on these snipers that are coming up, they're wearing the ghillie suit that you wore in multiplayer. You know, the spiky ghillie suit? I remember it fondly, because that's what I was looking for on like Eureka Harbour, to shoot the heads off that. Which is kind of cool. The snipers, though, they will kill you in 2 bullets, I think. The first bullet puts you to near death, the second bullet kills you. They're very accurate too. Never test them. If you damage, then they hit you, it's instant death. But push up slowly, get your reloads in, use your minimap as best as you can, use your grenades when need be, and make sure you replenish your ammunition a lot. It'll keep you alive. There is an interesting firefight coming up here that has a helicopter fight as well, so just clear these guys out and then rush the chopper and hopefully take it down. But it's interesting, isn't it, Battlefield? At this moment in time, Battlefield 5 is, community-wise, it's in a dark place. It's in a place where almost every single factor of the game has been a disappointment. Everything they've added, everything they've done, pretty much everything they've changed has kind of rubbed the community the wrong way. There's been I mean, it was doomed to begin with, wasn't it? The initial press for the game was very negative. It was like, if you don't want women in the trenches, fighting World War II and all this other stuff, then don't buy the game. It was a very hostile and politically charged kind of debut, and it never recovered from it, which is kind of interesting because this game doesn't have loot boxes. It has microtransactions, and it has a store that's got some pretty aggressive prices, but it doesn't even have the boxes that Battlefield 1 had, so you can't even blame the aggressive microtransactions for the failure. It's the communication and lack thereof of communication from DICE with the community. It's strange design choices that the community doesn't understand, and it's tailoring your game to people who will never play it, which I think is a huge thing that we're facing in video games now. And no doubt, if you've played a franchise for a few years, you'll notice this. Modern Warfare has been struggling with it for a long time, Call of Duty. It's an identity crisis. And what these developers do, which is so strange to me, but it makes sense. They look at what's successful. And they look at what they think makes them successful. What are the features that draws a player to a game like World of Warcraft, or draws a player to a game like Rainbow Six Siege, or draws a player to any of these games? Why do people put hours and hours and hours into these titles? What is it that gives it that appeal? And then they borrow elements from series that have used these particular elements for considerably longer and have refined them to a point where they're so sharp and so well implemented that they mean the game. When you think of Battlefield, what do you think? You think of large-scale battles. You think of being there on the front line as a plane goes over and an explosion happens, as you lay down on the grass or on the mud and get covered in all the debris. You think of the tanks. You think of the warfare, of how authentic it looks and how beautiful it looks, and the destruction. And there are factors that make Battlefield that, if you don't have them, they don't feel like Battlefield, or they feel like a lesser Battlefield. And every game has these factors. So what devs are doing now is they're borrowing snippets of these factors to try and capitalise on these markets. Look at Modern Warfare. It added a ground war that was closer to Battlefield with vehicles and large-scale, skirmishes. It's Modern Warfare's equivalent of Battlefield to try and pull away the Battlefield player. Look at some of the stuff that's in this. I heard the other day that the revive mechanic in Battlefield 5 is similar to PUBG's, and some people think that they've just kind of taken it from that. The reverse proning that you can do in this game, which a lot of people really dislike because it makes you look like a dead body or somebody that needs reviving, is apparently something that happens a lot in Rainbow Six, that they've just kind of snipped from that. There are all these things that they've kind of taken. The Battle Royale that they've taken, from things like Daisy and what have you. Was it Daisy that had it? There were a few different ones, weren't there? H1Z1, PUBG, so many different variants. But taking these pockets of success and then splicing them into this overall body, but the body suffers because of it. It's graft versus host, syndrome, or whatever they call that. It's rejecting it. It's a body rejecting an organ that's not its. It's fighting it. And it's making what people go for that franchise to lesser and not as enjoyable. Be careful on this corner here, guys. There's so much clipping that goes on. I was really mad just then. If you ever see me wiggle the mouse around like that, it generally means I was probably shouting at the time. So yeah, not a fan of clipping, it turns out. Yeah, never have been. Collision's always been something that's irked me to death. I want to go in there and trim every invisible wall, I really do. Because I feel like we're so past it, guys. We need to clean these models up, clean these meshes up. This should never happen. Come on now. But they're taking these elements from games that people don't want to play. Battlefield, people don't want to play COD. They play Battlefield because they love Battlefield. They don't play COD because they don't like it, because it's not like Battlefield. And what they're doing is they're taking from these other franchises and they're diluting the base. They're diluting what made them so good. So Battlefield people feel like the most recent Battlefield is losing its identity for all this flash-in-the-pan hotness of these other games. And the developers are making their games for an audience that doesn't exist, and it's hurting the audience that does exist. And I talk about this a lot. Be careful here, guys. There's going to be 2 choppers that come and drop some guys in. Those guys on the roof have grenade launchers. I didn't kill the one on the right, and he was bombarding me, and it was suppressing my aim or some bullshit, and I just could not fire back, and it ended badly. But it won't end like that this way, because of course the glory of editing makes it look like I never make mistakes. But I do. You die really quick here, so be careful. But the turning away the core audience, Modern Warfare did the exact same thing. I think that's one of the things I like most about Siege. I don't like Rainbow Six Siege. I'll never like Rainbow Six Siege. I liked Rainbow Six Vegas. I liked Rainbow Six Rogue Spear. I liked the old ones. I just think they were better games. Siege, for me, is boring in every conceivable way, and I just will never ever be the type of person that wants to play a game that is, the fundamental premise of it is essentially peeking in possibly small angles, because if you poke anything else out, you get shot immediately by the guy doing the exact same fucking keyhole surgery with his rifle on the other side. It's just not the kind of game I'm interested in. But I respect the hell out of it. I respect the hell out of that series because it's committed to what it does. And just because I don't like it doesn't mean it has to change. I think that's fantastic. I love the fact I don't like Siege, because it means the people who do don't get their game polluted and diluted by what I like. They're not trying to get me like these other games are trying to get everybody else, and I respect the hell out of it. I also respect that Siege doesn't use aim assist. I think in 2020, boys and girls, I think it's time to test whether or not you can use a fucking controller. I really do. And it's easy for me to say that now I've moved to mouse and keyboard, but it's just, there's something that has to be said for playing the game yourself. I can't tell you it, you have to feel it. There's just something about knowing that you did everything that makes it feel so much more satisfying. So much so, I will never play another shooter on controller. Ever. Because it's just not satisfying the same anymore. It's ruined it for me, and I don't want to take away from anyone's achievements, because I do think that there are very, very skilled people on controller, but I feel like aim assist needs to be lessened. It needs to be lessened a large amount. We need to see who can really aim and who's the guy staring at the floor and can't track a target. Like, show the difference between a scrub and a good player. You know? It's time to start showing that, and Siege does a really, really good job, because everybody in that game who you come across who's not cheating and using a Cronus Max to use a PC input system, every person you come across doesn't have aim assist, and it's 100% human on human, and it might look ugly at times, and it might be difficult, but there's a learning curve, there's a skill gradient, and when you get a kill in that game, it probably feels so goddamn satisfying. So I really respect Siege for that. It's doing things other games aren't doing. This is quite a long checkpoint, this as well. Don't push too aggressively, because if you get put out in the spot and you get put down, you'll die. Because there's a helicopter that's coming in a moment, and the helicopter killed me, and I had to do this entire firefight again. Thankfully, this firefight's really easy, and there's a ton of super good head glitches over here, and I'm using the M60 to a decent effect to capitalise on this position. But I think that that's the thing that's a lot of modern multiplayer shooters now are suffering from, because they're all trying to get on this hot new bandwagon to essentially mimic these bigger franchises. Some areas it works, some areas it doesn't work, but the universal, I feel, is the communities, the hardcore communities, the people that want to play the game every day for the rest of the year, those people are suffering. And it's disappointing. And I appreciate that. I wouldn't expect a company to make a game for the hardcore community, because the hardcore community is only like the top 8% of the people that play the game. They have to market it towards the casual market, because those are the people who make up like 80% of that player base, or some ridiculous number. The person who plays once every few weeks, the person who plays 30 minutes on a Friday and then doesn't touch it through the weekday, you know, the guy who picks it up and doesn't play it, the guy who plays a bit of the campaign and then doesn't turn it on, the guy who turns it on to show it to a friend and look how realistic it looks. That is the core market. It's the hardcore market that suffers, because it's the hardcore market that plays the game a lot, and they love it and they want it to be better, so those are the people putting the critiques forward. And as I was saying, right now DICE are in a really interesting position, because they're in the position where Battlefront 2 was before there was this general consensus and reversal of opinion on that game. And it's funny, because Battlefront 2 was always a good game. It was a good game marred by a couple of interesting decisions and some really bad publicity. It was cool and hip to shit on Battlefront 2 for reasons that never truly existed. They didn't. There are still areas of criticism that could be labelled at it that I would 100% support, but fundamentally Battlefront 2 was a martyr. It was martyred and scapegoated when the real anger should have been expressed at Activision and EA and all these other franchises that did it way worse, even though obviously, EA is the publisher for Battlefront, but you know what I mean. I feel like the wrong people took the brunt of just the aggressive microtransactions and all that other nonsense that's been polluting games for a long time now. But they turned it around. They know how to turn it around. They've done it with another franchise, and now Battlefield 5 sits on the very same precipice of two choices, the right choice and the wrong one. And DICE have been completely silent because they've been on holiday, which is fucking hilarious when you think of the state of the game. Because if you go on the forums, you would think that it was the end of days. You would think the sky was falling. It's hilarious if you go on Reddit, guys. Reddit is just... Reddit's not the best place for information, but it gives you a general consensus of the more vocal parts of the community. No one is happy. Everyone is angry. Really angry. A lot of people are stopping playing. There was a statistic that was released recently for Christmas on Christmas sales. Battlefield 5 was not on it for a game that was purchased really a whole bunch on that list. And it went on sale, like a lot of the other games. And do you know what game was on that list? Battlefront 2. To give you an idea of just how much the opinion on that game is changing. So right now, DICE, in their silence, hopefully they're postulating on what they're doing next and where they're going and what the next drive is. They have an opportunity now to do a Battlefront 2. Hopefully they do, and the Battlefield community are going to have another year of a really, really fun game with lots of cool new additions and features that do nothing but help rebuild those bridges that have been burnt with the community. DICE have announced there will not be a Battlefield in 2020, so it's going to be 2021. There's going to be a whole year of Battlefield 5 for it to improve, and I really, really hope that it gets the attention that it deserves, because coming from a guy with no experience in the game, completely ignorant to all of this outside of what I've read, I am having a great time with it. I'm having more fun with Battlefield 5 right now than almost any other game. I had more fun in the first game I played on that game than I've had in all the hours I've put into Modern Warfare. I'm legitimately having a good time, and I can't stress just how satisfying and how nice it feels to have that experience, because it reminds me of when I got into Battlefront 2. It reminds me of when I got into Titanfall 2. It reminds me of these multiplayers where when I picked them up, all I wanted to do was play more, and all I thought about was those experiences. And that's me playing solo. Battlefield solo, not in a squad. Imagine if I had people who were willing to enable me to play even more. I probably wouldn't have even had the time to make this video. Because that's how good it can be when, you squad up and you've got people pushing objectives and reviving and everything. Everything is better with friends, including lynching, mobs and executions. But that right there, ladies and gentlemen, was a little bit of history of Battlefield and some of the current state of it, if you're not aware of it. The weapon just in front here is the F2000, the gun that Sam Fisher uses in Splinter Cell. Very spacey looking weapon. I would love to use that, but Battlefield has such a history with shit iron sights that I just find it too painful to stare through apertures and rings and all kinds of nonsense. I talk about this a lot in first-person shooters, and it's a video that I've been meaning to make for many years, and I always kind of forget to do it, but it's this idea of the artistry of iron sights and the difference between realism and, one-to-one authenticity versus aesthetically pleasing and functional. Because iron sights by themselves were invented to serve a purpose. Their purpose is to give you an idea of where the bullet is going to go, and they do a good job of that, but they're very crude and rudimentary, and there's a lot of legacy technology there. Iron sights that were created hundreds of years ago that are used because they kind of work, there's no real need to update them. And then a lot of the more modern implementations of this are things like optics, with certain scopes and sights and things, which scopes and sights in real life are fantastic because they do so many things and they're all really, really well ergonomically designed. Whereas in video games, I'm one of those people that I kind of prefer not to run those on weapons if I can avoid it. And mostly it comes from the Pick 10 system in Black Ops, where if you want to put a red dot on your gun, you lose an attachment or you lose a space to use something else. And in my opinion, if you can get used to iron sights, even if they're bad, and you can get used to using them and get functional at using them, you can give yourself an extra attachment. And it's a philosophy that's kind of stuck with me. Ever since Call of Duty 4, getting used to the iron sights and using them was always something that I enjoyed to do. And from there, I've played a lot of first-person shooters, and I've just grown a tolerance and a desire for a certain kind of iron sight. There are some that I think are wonderful and majestic and fantastic, and some that I question who the fuck designed them and why you would think anybody would want to stare through them. Because there are times when the iron sight is spot-on accurate to how it is in real life, and that's fine. You know, it's not for me sometimes, and it might not be one that I choose to use, but you can understand where they're going with it. And then there's other ones where they're not even accurate to real life, they just look fucking awful. So you're sitting there wondering, what is this torture device you expect us to stare through? Couldn't you just take some time to make this aesthetically pleasing and cool? Because there's nothing like a nice, functional, simple, Spartan, beautiful iron sight. And see, like this one here, this is never going to win awards with me personally because it's just not the way I like it. But it's thin, it gives me a pretty definitive post at the front, and I can use it to hit what I need to hit and be effective. It's not too obscuring. You know, it ticks all the boxes that are needed. But in Battlefield, famously Battlefield had really bad iron sights. And one of the areas where it's not so much of a problem, especially in the most recent ones from what I've experienced, is the hip fire in these games is crazy good. Like, I didn't realise just how good the hip fire could be, and of course in Battlefield 1 and 5 there was a variant in Battlefield 1 that was better at firing from the hip, which I think was the trench variant. And then of course in Battlefield 5 you can specialise to make your gun better at hip fire. And one of the advantages of using hipfire in these type of shooters is that it enables you to move as quickly as you normally move, because when you aim in a lot of first-person shooters you limit your potential speed. So being able to hipfire gives you better mobility, the better ability to strafe left and right and fire at your opponent. It also gives you better vision too, better periphery, because you don't have the iron sight taking up a large percentage of the screen. So there's a lot of advantages to hip firing and shooting from the hip. One of the most popular shooters in the world, which is of course CSGO, is a game fundamentally that has no iron sights. It's a game from the bygone era where that wasn't a mechanic that was used, and that has survived in its gameplay. I don't know much about CSGO because I've always thought it was fucking awful, which I know is completely sacrosanct and shouldn't be said because it's a legendary game that a lot of people love, but for me I just never liked it. But the hipfire in that game is crazy, right? It's all hipfire. So whenever you hipfire in a game, people compare it to that because it comes from that bygone age of, you know, the arena shooter where hipfiring was pretty much the only way to shoot. This boat here, by the way, guys, when it spawns you in, if you go directly forward, you'll go the wrong way. It's one of those moments where there's a bit of environmental puzzling here. So try not to go the wrong way if you can avoid it, and then just come over to where this locker is and start doing some precarious climbing. But I don't really know too much about CSGO after, you know, all the years I've done of ignoring it from when I played it. But isn't that a game where if you move, your bullet doesn't go where you point? Like, I think that's a game where to shoot you have to stand still. And the whole point of it is like moving to dodge and then stopping to shoot and then moving again, and it's got a whole host of really strange things that govern the way it works, which I always find really interesting, because you'll notice that when you play a shooter, if you play Battlefield or Call of Duty, you'll get those people in a stream, they're just like, oh, you should play a real shooter, a man shooter like CSGO, and I always tell those people to fuck off because they're assholes. But I do find it interesting that there's this hierarchy of respected shooters. Like when I was playing Battlefront 2 online quite a lot, I annoyed somebody with Leia, and they sent me a message being like, oh, you'd never be able to do that to me on Rainbow Six Siege. And I says, well, that's probably because no one with a functional brain will play that boring piece of dog shit. And you should have seen him. The guy blew up and he was like, oh my god, best game ever, and everything. And it's just funny, isn't it, that there's this echelon of respected shooters. You can't be a good player if you play Call of Duty, because there's this elitism to it, isn't it? It's like that Dota mentality of, if you don't play Dota, you're not smart and, you know, big-brained and cool and everything. Just really funny. This is a defense segment, and it starts you with a 50 cal here, which is a very satisfying gun. And it was reminding me of the good old days of doing this in the multiplayer a very long time ago. But I'm going to be swapping between the pistol as well, because I wanted to test the pistol out, and that's exactly what you're going to see me do in this footage. All you have to do here is defend. People are going to rush from both sides, so just pick them off, do what you can. That's a shotgun, by the way. Look at that spread. That's so funny. I love that. But isn't it strange, you know, every game has its differences of its skills and its abilities and what it demands on you and what you can get really good at. Yet there's just that kind of elitism that turns up, you know. You see it in every single genre too. Every single genre has that kind of elitism. And I was listening to a streamer mention how Battlefield is looked at as being kind of more of a serious game. You know, it's more of a realistic game is the word they like to put out there, even though there's nothing realistic about Battlefield really. It's just got some stuff that's awkward as fuck that's become a fundamental of the series. You know, there's nothing realistic about respawning, is there? There's nothing realistic about sprinting infinitely. You know, it's kind of silly. But fundamentally, it's the features that make it awkward that give it that factor of being authentic and accurate, and it's just like World War II. Yeah, golden guns and fucking red dot sights in World War II. Love it. Funny though, right? Funny how we have that perceived mentality. But when you think about Battlefield, outside of a lot of the things it used to do, it's a lot more casual now. You know, for me to jump into Battlefield 5 and immediately start wrecking people just because I've got a lot of years of first-person shooter knowledge, that's not something that I would have been able to probably do in the older ones, because they used to be more particular. They used to be awkward and weird and goofy, and a lot of the things I've mentioned about this game, where you put your reticle on a person, you start shooting, the whole thing starts recoiling and jumping around and blurring the screen, and you miss every bullet even though you're on them, you know? There's so many systems that used to be more particular, and it always makes me think of like Operation Flashpoint when that first came out. I played Operation Flashpoint in secondary school on a friend's PC, and I'd never played anything like it because it was such a large scale and it was such it adhered to realism in such a strange way. And when we played it, we took it super seriously. You know, like laid on your belly, crawling for like 40 minutes just to get to an AI that kills you instantly in a headshot. Like, it was such a bizarre game, but it was loved because it was so authentic. It was so realistic, you know? It had all these things that, when you mention them nowadays, I'm just like, oh my god, take it out. Just take it out. All the stupid shit. Like, it's so funny, isn't it, how we've got to the point in a lot of games where they've tried so hard to be realistic and have all of these cool things for immersion and for putting you in the experience. Oh, by the way, guys, this is the glitch. I completely forgot to mention it. You can soft lock the game on PC here. When you're landing in that parachute, do not go forward. Let the game land you in that clearing that I landed in. If you push forward and you like finagle through the trees and do some awesome sequence break and speed up the level, this will never happen. What happens is, at the top, you'll shoot everybody and you'll never be able to go down the side because it'll tell you it's out of bounds, so you're not able to do what I'm doing right now. And I was there for like 20 minutes until I realised it had fucked up because I couldn't understand what was going off, and I kept restarting thinking it would fix it. But it completely soft-locked the level, and I had to restart the whole level and do it again. And this was at the point where my enjoyment of the project was kind of waning, because we'd had a handful of problems that made me re-record things. And I say it a lot on these walkthroughs, but it's worth repeating. I'm one of those people that the first time I do something, there's a special feeling to it for me. There's a spontaneity to it. There's usually something interesting that happens with the capture. There's usually... It's exactly what I wanted it to be a lot of the times. It doesn't always work that way, of course. There are times when I want to re-record and things, and I do re-record, but fundamentally, the first time I do something like a commentary, like this commentary right now, if I were to stop this right now, 2 hours into it, and it was all gone, I had to do it again, I'd be pissed off. Not necessarily because it's been the best commentary in the world, but I feel like at that moment in time, it was the best I could do. It fit the video, it filled the time, hopefully it kept you engaged, you maybe learnt something, or you were able to share your thoughts and what have you. That's kind of what it's all about. The first time you do it, you have that spark to do it, because it's fresh, it's different, it's new. Doesn't matter if you've been making walkthroughs for years and you've made hundreds of them. That first time you press play and you start talking, and you don't have a script and you don't have things you want to talk about. You've got an idea, but you don't write it down. There's no plot here. There's no storyboarding. It's just go for it, see what we can do. There's something that you capture in that moment, regardless of if you don't like it, you probably think it's dog shit, and I'm just delusional, and that's fine. But fundamentally, you've captured a moment in time, which I think is precious in something like this. As insignificant and small as this is, a person talking over a video game just to fill the space, there's something there that's captured, and when you have to do it again, you lose the verve for it. There's something palpable that's lost. And that's what happens when you re-record. Sometimes it can be for the better, like on something where you can play better. For instance, if I could do this whole game without getting shot, if I played good enough and my aim was fast enough, that'd be amazing. I'd do that. I'd try to do that. If the shooting was better, if the shooting was 1-to-1 and every time I put my reticle on a person the bullet went there, that'd be all over that. And if it was possible to do it, but I don't see that happening. And first-person shooters are very difficult like that. Like, if I can put performance in and make it awesome. For instance, the Max Payne... Look at that! Rocket to the face. I remember that bit. How did I not die? Crazy. Just goes to show the damage is all over the place. Hey, the physics! I love it. But like Max Payne 3 on that walkthrough that I made, or that no damage run, when I took damage on that game, it was really obvious to tell. I could just restart, do it again, and my aim could completely supersede the need to not take damage. And it was a really fun project that was tricky in parts, but for the most, it was just really fun to find the paths and find the routes. You can't do that to this, you know? It's not like a Devil May Cry or some kind of action game where avoiding damage is based on the balletic nature of your playing. I wish you could, it'd be really cool if you could, but it's just not the way they're designed. So re-recording on those moments make a lot of sense. Like, I do have some regrets I didn't re-record sections of my Devil May Cry 5 walkthrough, but I feel like it'll make it easier for the inexperienced person to relate to. Because one of the things I noticed more so on walkthroughs over my years of making them is that people don't look at them and think about them the way that you do. You know, you expect people to be like-minded in a lot of ways, but it wasn't the case at all. I found more people were not so much put off, but were intimidated by some of the performance in those videos because they didn't think that they were able to do it. And I never thought of myself as a player that would do that to other people, because you do it to yourself, don't you? You watch these people on YouTube, you're like, Jesus Christ, how do they do that? I'll never be that good. But you don't directly translate that to your own gameplay a lot of the times, unless you know you're good. So I never thought that by recording something awesome and making it really cool, that people would watch it for help and then be intimidated by it. But that was the feedback I got far more often than the inverse. And it's those type of things that you start to change how you approach doing things, leaving more mistakes in, you know, showing that this isn't a flawless run, guys. This is not just 15 minutes and I did it masterfully. This was 5 hours and you didn't see the 4 hours of failing. Which is why I always try to be as open and as transparent with my commentary as I can, guys, because I don't want to give this impression that I'm a godly player at every single game, because I'm not. It takes time to get even remotely average for me sometimes. There are certain games where I do have an affinity, but if you ever watch anything and you're like, I could never do this, that's the wrong attitude to have. Your attitude needs to be, I can definitely do this if I put in the time. It's just about finding the time, and that's the hardest part, isn't it? Because everybody's so goddamn busy, everything's vying for your attention. How are you going to pull yourself away from Pornhub before you burn your palms off? It's just the way of the world. This pistol's really fun too. I can strafe pretty quickly, and it's very accurate. It just doesn't quite do the damage I need it to do sometimes. That's one of the things I love about Battlefield 5, the feedback when you shoot people. Like, even with a ruined TTK, even with engagement ranges for a submachine gun that should never be engaged, it still feels great to shoot people. Like, the tink of the headshot is so satisfying. The hit sound, the hit marker, where the HUD pops up and shows the points. I think DICE really nailed it with that. It makes me wish that campaign was better. It really does. The audio in this game is superb. Did you hear how muted that shot was just then because I got injured? This game was really ahead of its time with audio. I think the audio in this game is probably better than Battlefield 5. Which is a joke when you think about it, because that's a tank. Because in Battlefield 5, they've done so many crazy things with the audio to make stuff sound different, but the audio's so over the place with the balance that a lot of the times you don't even hear the plane until you're dead. Like, and I don't know if that's how sound works. Maybe some kind of scientist can explain this, but don't you usually hear the whirring of an engine before you get strafed by a World War II plane? I didn't realise they all had stealth engines. Like, it's very bizarre. You don't hear the tank until it's snuck up on you on its tiptoes. It's like, what the fuck? I should not be hearing a tank after I'm dead, you know? It's really weird. The stuff like that. This whole segment here is just kind of tank heavy. Luckily, you see him on the map just then? He was on the map for some reason. I think it's because I looked at him. I looked at him on the map, and then I killed him off the map. They should just keep him on there the whole time. Like, you can see that Jeep, that little quad thing. Ooh, there's a shotgun. That's a shotgun at the end of the game, that one. Very good gun. As I was saying, though, I love the movement in Battlefield 5 as well. I don't like the movement problems. I'm not going to tell you the movement's perfect, because it's not. There's times when it's... Like, how many times have you wrestled with trying to prone? You know, it's crazy. There's a lot of ways to get stuck. A lot of times when you mantle something you didn't mean to and it does a really slow animation and gets you killed. My favourite is I can't go crouched because I've changed my crouch button so that I don't have to double tap it to do the slide. All I do is I hold crouch and I do the slide. But what it means is I can't crouch. I can prone and I can slide, but I can't crouch. So there's a lot of moments where I need to be lower and the best thing to do would be to crouch. But because I can't do that, I have to prone. And apparently, in this game, when you're transitioning from prone to standing, there's a time where you can't shoot. And I come from COD where you can shoot. Dude, you can shoot when you're in the womb. At almost every moment you can shoot in that game. It might not be accurate and it might be hipfire based, but you can shoot in some advantageous positions. So the amount of times I'm standing up during a gunfight from prone, when if I'd have just laid there, I would have been fine and killed the guy effortlessly. But because I'm so used to getting up, firing and engaging the fight and being mobile, that I'll do that and then my gun won't shoot and I'll lose the gunfight. So there's a lot of movement things that make me mess up. And I should probably mess with it so that it doesn't work that way. But the way that the slide works now, I like it so much, I'm willing to sacrifice crouching. And I know crouching because you can crouch sprint, you can do a few different crouch specific things. I know it would make me a better player. It would, in the long run, affect me in such a great way, but I'm willing to sacrifice it. Because the slide is just so sick. And it makes me want to just slide around the campaign, hip-firing awesome SMGs. But I can't. Because that's just not what the campaign is. The campaign is sneaking into air bases with gas. You know, it's sneaking into weird places in Snowy Town, Germany as two women and doing weird shit. Like, it's just bad visibility and a whole host of other problems. And I don't understand how they've made it so poorly when you think that... I felt that the stories in Battlefield 1 were really good. There was one that was very tank heavy, but it had some stealth skirmishes and then it had some firefights. There was one that was a little bit plane heavy, but then it had some stealth sections and some firefights. And then there was just two really bombastic ones, which were my favourite ones, which was the Italian campaign with the armoured guy and the Australian campaign on Gallipoli. They were just really fun infantry-based modes, and I feel like the stories in 5 were just really bad. And it's so tragic because the game's beautiful. It feels really good. It's got so many settings for you to customise to get it to feel how you like. It's a game where you can change the FOV on console, which is so rare these days and so frustrating for people that, you know, have it on those systems. Yeah, I really wish I could cover it, guys, but it's just shit, you know? It goes back to that thing that I was mentioning that the community's talking about. Every aspect of Battlefield 5 is a disappointment. The multiplayer is disappointing. You know, the Combined Arms, which is the co-op mode, is laughably bad. The custom game modes that they were hyping for a while is laughably bad. The firing range is laughably bad. Wow, look at the choppy footage right now. This is very disappointing to see. I thought we were beyond those encoding moments, but apparently not. That sucks. I'm sorry about that, guys. Luckily, this is literally just... It's a cutscene with a gun. All I'm doing is breaking shit, that's it. I mean, it's very fun, minus the shitty mouse input, but there's no difficulty here, and it's just an epic section. But yeah, the encoding still happens, guys. Tells me to turn it down. And I don't know why. OBS been weird. Hopefully I can fix that in the future. But yeah, Battlefield 5. So much good stuff in that game, but so disappointing. I'm surprised how much I like the submachine guns, though. It makes me wish I could have found more submachine guns in this campaign, because at the beginning, when I picked up the Type 100, because of course the beginning of this is set during the war, it was very reminiscent of Battlefield 5, because of course that's a war game too, and it has the Type 100 in it as well, and it's a very, very strong gun there too. So just the idea of being able to move around in, you know, a decade away from that, because this was, what, 10 years ago? Use some of the hip fire and some of the mobility. I noticed on this game, strafing left and right was really quick, but it kind of wobbled your camera and didn't really help your aim too much. Because it is interesting, isn't it, the things that we transition from and to. I talk about shooters all the time, because I've been covering a lot of them, and this idea of how iron sights became this big thing, ADSing became a new mechanic. You look back on things like Wolfenstein and Doom. Those games were guns in the centre of the screen, right? Shoot people in front, there's no up and down scaling. Then we moved to Quake after all the Doom clones. Quake is 3D, you look up and down diagonally. Adds an extra dimension, brings it forward, really, really cool. Then it keeps evolving and evolving. We get things like GoldenEye, a console-driven game that's got an aim assist for you that's incredibly efficient at picking people up. And then from there it spawns a whole host of different games. You know, we've got things like Half-Life cropping up on PC and taking over the world. We've got Soldiers of Fortunes, Unreal coming back, and Time Splitters turning up, and Black redefining console shooters, and all kinds of great things popping up and popularising. And then you have that Vietnam game that was the first instance of using an iron sight, looking down the sight of the gun. Some games, like Fear and certain ones before it, they'd enabled you to zoom in on the perspective, but you never looked down the gun the same way. Then you have games like Resistance, where it went to an ADS type perspective, but it was a little bit pulled back, and then there was a reticle above it, so it was kind of a hybrid system. And then you move forward a few more years, and Call of Duty standardised it, and then everybody started using it, and then you have franchises like Halo that was hipfire dominant, that embraced ADSing, and then it's all you know, focused on that for a certain amount of time. And then we have games like Battlefield that are enabling players to play either way. This segment here, by the way, guys, is really shit. It checkpoints you in front of a mounted gun, and I shot this guy in the head like 5 times with the fucking 50 cal from 2 yards, so there's no bullet drop, and he wouldn't die. It would not hit his face. And I died a bunch of times because he kills you really quickly. So what I had to do is, the moment I came into the game after the checkpoint, I had to sprint back to the gun box and then pick out a different gun. And I got so annoyed at this douchebag killing me that I decided to shoot him with a rocket. Stuck a rocket up his cunt and got rid of him that way. And then now the rest of this level's really fun. I think there's one segment coming up that's broken as shit because you just blow up when you're following your team for no reason, and it's really silly. But other than that, this reminds me of Favela in Modern Warfare 2, because it's just claustrophobic buildings, lots of dudes popping out, a great opportunity to just pelt them with as many LMG rounds as you can. Do you notice how the enemies in this game miss a lot? He was point blank with a shotgun and he missed me. I don't even know how. I don't know how you miss at that range. It's kind of cool. Really cool, actually. But then we get to games where you can ADS and you can hip fire, and it's really funny because when ADSing was rising, I was obsessed with it. I thought it was so interesting and so cool. It was the future. It was all I wanted in games. I wanted Halo to ADS. I wanted all games to have them. I wanted these beautiful iron sights and these wonderful optics, and I really enjoyed it. And then I played every single first-person shooter ever, because that's what I'm like. And then now I've come to really appreciate hipfire. It's hilarious and hypocritical in some ways, but it's true. Like, when I get a game where I can hipfire and be faster, and I can be more mobile, and I can crank that FOV up, and I can see more and enable me to flip between targets and just be lethal and quick and agile, it just feels amazing. And then you realise that's what shooters were before we slowed them down. And now there's this transition of some games sticking to it, some games deviating, and a nice mix of both. But like, you look at a game like Titanfall. In Titanfall, there was quite a lot of ADSing, and I think certain hipfire guns were pretty good at certain ranges, but fundamentally it was very, very ADS based. But in Titanfall 2, the hipfire was so accurate, you could essentially shoot from the hip with most of the guns. There's some that you want to aim with, of course, but fundamentally, your gun was the same from the hip as it was when you aimed. And it really changed how I looked at games, and how I looked at shooters, and how I looked at the mobility. And then you combine that with the mobility of Titanfall, and then you just have this wonderful combination of... This is a game where you're meant to be fast, even though you get a ridiculous penalty for running on walls when it comes to aiming, which I never understood. It was a really confused design. But you've got this great hipfire, you've got this great mobility, and together you can do some really crazy things. There's a guy on that roof, by the way, near that aerial, and he's being a dick. This guy's a dick. Stop being a dick! Look at him! Guy's a dick. I don't like that man. But Titanfall really made me reappraise it. And then when I was playing games like when the Doom came out, Doom 2016 I think it was, where you could hipfire a lot in that game and it was really good. And then I played Shadow Warrior 2 and the hipfiring in that game was really good as well. But it gave you the option to ADS if you wanted to. And then of course Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1 was a big hipfire game, wasn't it? The pistols, the submachine guns, the assault, like almost everything in that game can be ADS. And this is it, guys. This is a part where you'll just die for no reason. It's programmed explosives as it's getting shelled, and you're supposed to run down here with your team, but it doesn't matter what you do. Sometimes you just take too much damage and die. I died here 3 times, and each time I just followed my team. I didn't do anything different, and the time that's on this recording is the time where the game didn't kill me. And I was getting really pissed off, because it shouldn't work like this. Luckily, there's a checkpoint just here, so just this next section is random. If you die, you die. There might be some crazy scripting or some crazy path that I wasn't figuring out. But this is an area that where COD would do this really well, this game didn't do it really well. Like, this is an area where it reminded me of old school games with how it was killing me. It was just like, you're perfectly fine, and now you're dead in a programmed explosive. Good luck. And then your team continues without you, perfectly fine, and you're dead as fuck when you were with them. It's just like, what are you doing, game? Weird. Absolutely stupid, but there's a charm to it too. I can't get too mad. And I try. But in Battlefield 5, for people that don't know, there is a specialization tree on your weapon. It's a simple one. There's just, I think, 4 nodes on each side. There's a left-hand path and a right-hand path. And once you unlock level 4 on the gun, you can pick which ones you want, and then you can reset it and readjust them if you want to. And how I thought they worked in the beginning is, I thought you had a choice. I thought you went down the middle, and you either went left or right. But you don't. I mean, you do, but you don't. How it works is, once you pick one side, you're on that side for a set amount of time before you can pick another side. And usually how it works is, you pick the first one, you can pick any side on the first one, and then the second one you can pick any side again, but the third one you have to commit to the side you picked on the second specialization. And then on the final one, you can pick any side again. And they've done this, of course, for balancing, but I hate it. I hate it, I really do. And the reason I hate it is because I can't choose everything I want, basically. I can't choose all the good shit. That's what it comes down to. To give you an example with the Nambu, the ridiculous Type 2 gun that everybody's hating on right now, the gun I'm absolutely loving. Its specialization, the first one, is quicker ADS, faster reload, faster recovery from sprinting to shooting. I choose recovery from sprinting, faster reload, because you reload a lot. Then after that, you have a choice of going on the left-hand side, which is better hip fire, or the right-hand side, which is better ADS fire. You get a choice here. Do you aim a lot? Pick that side. Do you hip fire a lot? Pick that side. I want to use hip fire on the Nambu at almost every range. However, I don't want the 1200 rounds per minute, which is incredibly good, but it limits me to 30 bullets, and because I play on Breakthrough on the Pacific maps, there's usually a lot of targets, and I can only kill 2 to 3 people with 30 bullets, and that's if I'm doing well, because there's times when you seem to spray way too many bullets and they didn't die somehow, so then you end up reloading in the middle and you have to swap to your pistol and it gets messy. So I want to do hipfire specialization with 50 round magazine, which is ludicrous for that gun. You should never get 50 bullets, but you can, so I'm going to do it. However, to get the 50 rounds, you have to be on the right-hand path. If you go on the better hipfire path on the left, you are then locked into 1200 rounds per minute. Fortunately, the Nambu's hipfire is really good anyway, and the final node lets you get better hipfire as well. But I can't quite have the hipfire to be as good as it would be if I had both of those nodes, if you see. And I kind of wish it worked that way so I could have the best of all worlds. But it doesn't, for probably really good reasons. That gun might be the exception though, because you don't have to specialise in the hipfire on it and it still has really good hipfire, which I don't agree with. I think that the hipfire on that gun should be questionable and just as random as a lot of the other ones without specialisation. I don't think you should be able to specialise on ADSing and get less recoil and then still have really strong hipfire. But as I mentioned earlier on in the video, I think that gun should be the equivalent of a shotgun for the medic. I think it should be a gun when you're up close, it wrecks everything, but as soon as you move out of 10-15 metres, you have to feather that trigger, you have to really know what you're doing, or you're just going to lose control of it. And I'll be really interested to see what DICE does, because they're going to nerf it. People are angry. People are really angry right now. And it's understandable, because it's so much better than a lot of other things, especially up close. The only real way to beat it up close, in a lot of people's minds, is to use the shotguns. But in my opinion, the grease gun, I've beat a Nambu up close with the grease gun on both fire modes. I think if you can hit your shots, you can beat that gun. I just think it's better than 90% of the other guns that you're going to come up against at that range. That if you're accurate enough, it's a monster. And I just feel like I win a lot of gunfights in Battlefield. It's a nice feeling. Every gunfight I get into in Modern Warfare, I've lost before I've started. So to feel like every corner I turn around, if I see somebody, I'm going to beat them, is a wonderful feeling. And it's the reason I'm having so much fun, I think. I'm also using a really strong gun. But I think I'm going to try to get gold on all the submachine guns because I love it. I just love how the gameplay feels when you're close on that game. I love the hip firing. I just love how accurate I feel at times. I love the feeling of getting in a gunfight and not instantly getting melted. Even against the Nambu, I don't get instantly melted. There are times, you know, when you come up against somebody who can aim and you're like, Jesus Christ, that was fast. But other than that, not a problem. So right here, guys, this was interesting. If you jump across that pipe in the water will kill you. The waypoint here wasn't exactly specific on what it wanted me to do. I'd not played this game in over 10 years, so I couldn't remember this segment, and I didn't want to die. I didn't want to try risking jumping across it and just see if it was a chance experience that I died. So instead, I climb on the pipe to the right here, and then I go across the top area. I don't know if you meant to do it like this, I can't remember. But this will work, and it will trigger the point you need. So if you watch, I'm just on the edge. I can't go any further, but I'm not falling off. So I walk across this roof like this, and then when I drop down, if you go forward, it triggers the team. So there's the save. There's the box. And then over here, there's going to be a checkpoint, and then you're going to get attacked by a van. And I don't know if that's a sequence break. I don't know if that's intended, but that's how I ended up doing it. Because I jumped across onto the pipe and I died instantly, and it made me do the firefight all over again, and I really didn't want to do it again, so I just kind of thought, fuck this noise. Fortunately for me, it worked. But one of the things I've noticed on Battlefield 5 is it can be quite awkward at times to get the classic maps. Everybody's playing the Pacific and the game is really pushing the Pacific maps, but when it comes to SMGs in close quarters, those maps are not good for it. You have to really force the engagements to get into those ranges, and then it gets really good, but fundamentally you're always coming up against people with better guns at better ranges, and I spend more time throwing smoke and trying to cover distance than I do getting in gunfights. And the other day I had to capture some objectives, and I ended up playing Devastation for the first time, and it was amazing. It was so much more close quartered. I felt so lethal. It was really, really cool. By the way, guys, this is the map that I think there is a Conquest map that uses this area, this location. Those warehouses in front of me, I'm certain I've been inside them in PvP. So if anybody remembers this asset or this particular, wherever this is, if it was a map, this was what I was speaking about earlier. This is the hardest part of the game. There's a lot of enemies here, they're very accurate, and for some reason you seem to die really quick on this level. I only died once towards the end. No, sorry, I died twice. Both times I pushed too aggressively, so you're going to notice that I'm going to pull back a little bit because this checkpoint's quite long. But there's a guy spamming rockets. Once again, this is quintessential DICE. You can't see anything because of the dust. I know thematically it makes sense, and I know cosmetically it's impressive and it's very cool and what have you, but it impedes on gameplay too much for my taste. I'm all for making it epic, but don't blind me when the AI have got perfect vision. Come on now, it's just really stupid. But yeah, the submachine gun play style on Battlefield is really fun. I also played a little bit of Rotterdam too, which I was really happy to get on because I've heard it's quite close quartered. And I only needed to cap one flag, so I played until I capped one flag and then I left because I don't play Conquest. And I find it to be just crazy and I don't understand it because I don't know the maps yet, so it's really intimidating and I just get killed from a million vehicles. But on that Rotterdam, I ended up pushing one of the sides and picking up a couple of guys, killing a few people, capping a few flags, and it felt really, really cool. That map looks awesome. And they just feel like such a breath of fresh air for me because I've never played them. So I've been playing Wake Island and Pacific and Iwo Jima so much. That's all the only experience I have, these huge fields. Just huge fields with no cover and a million dudes with guns that have got great range. And I'm running around with a fucking pocket machine gun that melts ridiculously. But at those ranges, it's just nowhere near as good. So it's really satisfying to try those closer ones, and I'm really looking forward to playing that Operation Underground. I've seen a few streamers play that, and it looks ridiculous. And there was a bug recently on the game, which I don't know if it got fixed in the most recent patch or what was going on, but your kit progress wasn't unlocking. So I got medic to level 17, and there's a revolver you unlock at level 15, I think it is, and it wouldn't give it me. And it was only till recently when the Tides of War updated that it gave me it, and I thought it was a different revolver. There's a really strong one that's called the Model 7, I think it's called the Model 27 it might be. It's this hand cannon thing that's quite slow but does ridiculous damage. It's a one-shot headshot, it's like the Deagle from Modern Warfare. And I thought it was that one, but it's not. It's a tinny one that's pretty good but not great. And it turns out you have to level up the Tide of War to level 30 to get that Magnum that I want. So I'm going to have to be leveling that up. But I only get chance to play like an hour, maybe 2 hours every so often. So I don't really get the opportunity to dunk a lot of time in what with all the painting and the house stuff we're doing. But hopefully once that's done, I'll be able to play it more. And I want to stream Battlefield 5. I think it could be pretty fun. But I accidentally streamed it the other day and my frame rate was awful. And the footage, because the Pacific levels are so beautiful and so detailed, the bitrate wasn't high enough to stream it at 1080p. So I think if I do stream it, it's going to have to be 900p or even 720p, because I don't have the detail for such a detailed game. The limit on the bitrate is too harsh. If we could get 9000 bitrate, I think 1080p would be a lot better. But as it stands, it just looks like a bloody collage. It looks like a kaleidoscope at times. It's way too difficult to see. And the game is so detailed, and everything about it, you're constantly spotting foreheads at 40 meters and tiny blips everywhere. Your guys are not going to be able to see that when I'm playing. You know, you're not going to be able to feel like you're a part of it and what have you, because you just can't see. It's like Lego, like watching Minecraft. Be careful here as well. I died here from that sniper. He shot me through the wall as well. There was no way my body was exposed. I don't understand how I died, but I did. So just be careful. But yeah, using all the different submachine guns, getting all the gold components on them, it could be pretty fun to do, because I feel like most of the SMGs in that game are really cool. They've all got decent accuracy, they've all got decent hip fire, they all, you know, some are better than others, obviously. But it's a fun game, guys, that's what I'm trying to say. From someone who's not really a Battlefield player, coming to play a Battlefield that is really hated right now, for very good reasons that I completely agree with, and even then, even in that moment of a dying franchise and a community that is beyond the point of giving up, I can still see, you know, the potential for the game. And you can see a lot of that potential in this game, even though this is... I don't know how PC players feel about this game, because it's definitely as console as it gets. Watch this, by the way. This has programmed this right now to get chased by this man as he tries to whack you while you reload. It's really funny. I thought I did it wrong the first time because he killed me. But it turns out it's part of the setup of this moment. And this is probably my favourite level in the game, because it's linear and it lets you just clean house, and I love that. It's also going to give us a shotgun that just devastates all the geometry, which is really nice. I don't like this red dot sight, so I'm going to hip-fire this gun. The hip-fire doesn't seem to be too bad, actually, which is kind of cool. But the FOV is so shit that I just can't see. Look at that iron sight, too. Oh, my goodness. How do you design that? How do you design that and think that's okay? Look at the 74U in Black Ops. Look at the 74U in COD 4. Look at the 74U in Modern Warfare 3. Beautiful iron sight. This game, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, it's got all the components, it just doesn't sit right. It's so stupid. Couple more guys in here. The screen is shaking like a motherfucker right now because we're in a plane. That was the thing I mentioned earlier on, one of the things I dislike about shooters. I think that the screen's fine if it shakes, but it shouldn't affect you. It should be a feature, like an effect. It shouldn't be tangible. But I suppose this plays into the idea that Battlefield has kind of been the game that made shit like that tangible to make it more immersive and make it feel more like a Battlefield. But here we go, guys. This shotgun's just going to strip everything, so if you want to take cover, you better hope there's nobody staring at you because they're just going to wreck you. Interesting gun, this. It's good, but it's also shit. There's times when it does its job wonderfully, there's times when you just hit mark a machine. But just use the seats, keep pushing forward. This really reminds me, of course, of Mile High. I think this was probably inspired by that. I would argue that it's not as well designed, because I think Mile High is kind of a speedrunner's paradise. It's so elegant in the way they've done it, if you know how to flash and everything. Whereas this is more fun, because it's not as... You flash this, you push this, you flash that, you push that, you kill him, you flash that, you push this, you're there. If you deviate from that in the Mile High on Veteran, you just murdered the whole time. It's very difficult to brute force your way through that sequence. Although I'm certain someone's done it. But here we go. Terminate Kirilenko, who takes 900 pistol bullets apparently. And that's the end of the walkthrough, guys. So thank you for watching and listening, and you take care now.